All right. Hello, everybody in recording land. Let's see. Let's go to slide. So I have a little bit of a different slide than I was thinking of starting with. What was I? I'll show you what I was thinking of starting with, just to continue to be a little alinear here. So I don't know if I was necessarily even going to get too much into this, but but this is the slide that I originally had. And then I also have a book, and I'm going to read a little example out of a book and I'll mention the name of the book, and that'll help us. Overall, we're looking at the method of knowing, and we're looking at issues relating to understanding our self-image and rebuilding it the way we want. And both of those things are going to be very sexy after we understand them. And I think you're into it now, but it's hard to do justice to the topics that I'll be talking about in terms of how interesting they might seem prior to explaining them. But then after, like if I told people, hey, I'm going to explain scenarios and semi-soft locks, and they say, what's this going to be about, before having any idea what those meant, then it wouldn't necessarily be as exciting as it is after the fact. So interestingly enough, and this is something you can, sometimes you're thinking about what you can do during the week and for yourself and when you have a notebook. And I thought I would point this out, that like fundamentally in life, we are trying to be happy and we're trying to get results in different ways, right? We often have some particularly clear and important goals that we're trying to go after. We also tend to have a sense that maybe we should go after more, like maybe what we dream of isn't even good enough or something, and that maybe we should have bigger dreams. So we kind of have this issue with maybe we should go for even bigger or better results. Plus, sometimes we get our results, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we'll end up getting a result, but on the way to it, we experienced more doubt or some sort of pain or negative emotions on the way that looking back we didn't need to experience. And then just overall we have a sense that however happy we are, probably it could be better, right? And we could just feel more of a sense of ease and calmness. So that's everyone's condition, right? And so some of us go after self-improvement more directly than others. Some people just don't even really think about it. But anyhow, when we think of that overall issue, which is kind of at the heart of what we're dealing with in life, right? What results do we go for? How do we get them? And how do we be happy on the way, right? That kind of summarizes our core thing. And then we might think, all right, well, I'd like to understand and or control my mind better, right? Or I just like to figure out why is it that my mind seems to lead me astray to a certain degree, or doesn't give me, kind of gives me the wrong idea about things. And if we try to get a sense of where that's going on, or where our mind is misleading us, is it like giving us the wrong facts, right? We can look at a visual illusion, right? Like the famous one with a line and the arrows going, or the lines or arrows going, towards the middle of the line or away from it, and it looks longer, right? I don't have it in front of me, but I think everyone knows what I'm referring to. And if not, you can Google visual illusions and get examples of visual illusions. So sometimes there's a sense that our eyes might be playing tricks on us, but that isn't probably a main issue that we're dealing with, right? And I agree, right? We have a blind spot that if we get in an accident, it could be a main issue, but that's not really what's going on much in terms of involving with figuring out the right results to go for, getting those results and being happy on the way. It's not really that, right? So then maybe it's like we have this idea that maybe we have these beliefs that are limiting, or maybe some beliefs are wrong, and that sort of thing. But really, maybe our worldview, maybe we need a better. Often people think that the answer might be mindset, right? If they can just sort of mix in the right perspective on things and positive thinking, and that can have an effect. But it's not it's more of a symptom if we have false beliefs or limiting beliefs or the wrong mindset. The closer to the core, or very close to the core, is that really where our mind screws us up constantly. It isn't that we like have like false facts or even false beliefs like so much. It's or at least trying to get those right is like swatting at symptoms, and it also just doesn't end up working. If you go to someone with false beliefs and you tell them a correct belief, it doesn't really help them very much, right? It'll have much more chance of pissing them off, right? Or making them like you less than helping. And even the same thing with you. If you hear ideas that are new that conflict with your own, the trouble is, it isn't, even if you're open-minded and want to understand what's correct, you kind of have an issue where you still don't know whether someone's right? If someone criticizes you, maybe they're right, but maybe they're wrong, right? And so maybe it can mislead you. Much closer to the heart of things, where we're running into issues with our minds, is that our sense of what's important, right, like day to day or overall topics. Oh, and another way to see this is with I mentioned media, right? And people say, oh, I don't believe the news. But what does happen with the news is the sense of what's important really does get determined by the news. So this is kind of a great illustration of what I mean. The real way the news tends to screw with us is how it affects our sense of what's important. And I have another great example, actually, and this gives another angle on, I have a very strong sense that school, and this is one of those things where a lot of us are going to be incentivized to not really, to kind of downplay this, and in a sense that's okay. But school is really detrimental, and one of the big reasons for it, and I'm not trying to talk about school here or the news. I'm talking about something much more important to you, which is you and your relationship with your own mind. But I'm using this to illustrate what I'm saying. One of the huge issues with school that's really a problem is the underlying way that it messes with our sense of what topics are important. Even so deep as when you tell a child, okay, think about that. So sorry, I know I'm interrupting myself. I'll complete that. Well, a little bit of a traffic jam here, as I have pretty frequently. Okay, so either way, I'll start with one of them and then do the next. One is that if you tell a child, well, think about that for yourself, then that presupposes that they already can think about it for themselves, that they already know how, and whatever their method, which is generally going to be a method using inference. I've used the term successive approximation in the past as well, and it'll reinforce that, but that's actually our default starter method, but it's not that great a method. But we're reinforcing that people already can think for themselves, and they should. They already know how. If we say you should do something, it means you should also already know how to do it. And so we're not opening people up to discovering a better method. We're acting like morally they should already know the method, and therefore whatever method they start with by default gets reinforced. And so the importance is on using a method that's actually a worse method, or worse in many cases, rather than figuring out what method to use. Another way that school messes with importance is that people are reinforced for answers, right? They're rewarded for answers rather than questions, right? Questions are sort of, once in a while, people are praised for questions, but far more often and realistically, right? Your actual your grades and everything is based on answers, pretty much, almost exclusively. And praise is tended. So the importance of answers is magnified and the importance of questions is diminished. So someone could go into school and parents could teach their kids or try to counteract all sorts of the overt symptoms of what they might learn in school, but that what's hidden is how it's messing with the importance of deep things like answers versus questions. And it's there then, and that's like an illustration of what's going on with us in our minds. It's not so much of a big deal in terms of knowing what's true, right? In phase 2 here of alchemy, there's kind of two main topics that I'm either building context for or dealing with directly and so forth, is the self-image, which includes like understanding standards and norms, which are like super goals and magnets on our goal. So it's critically important for that reason. And then there's our method of knowing, which will allow us to get underneath these super meta goals, our self-image, and design it the way we want correctly. Not just the way we want, actually, unless we use what we want as a logical synonym for correct, right? So design it correctly. As we do that, or as I mentioned the idea of a method of knowing what's true, then what we think of kind of at first probably is distinguishing which beliefs are true. But really, certainly that'll be a nice factor or consequence. But where we're really having an issue is not so much with the beliefs being accurate. It's with our sense of what's important in life and what isn't. And I know people talk about, oh, we need to think about what's important, like family, right? People talk about, oh, when you're on your deathbed, you don't say, oh, I wish I spent more time working. You say, oh, I wish I spent more time with my family or something like that. But I'm talking about kind of on a different level, where as I gave the illustration about the importance of answers versus questions. And that slides into our mind on such a deep level. The topics we talk about in alchemy in general, the issue of how to know, how to distinguish what's true, that is treated as totally unimportant, much like it's kind of like Zimbabwe related to the news, right? I have no idea what's going on in Zimbabwe, but that's the point. And it doesn't feel important to me. But if we think about it, one big part of the reason is that the news isn't talking about it, right? So it's not so much these surface beliefs so much as just our basic sense of what's important and what isn't is more the place to look when you're trying to figure out where is my mind by default not giving me the right sense of things, the right information, or is it, I've given the illustration of where the mind, by default, the mind's going to set the context to control the context, and it's going to give you decisions within kind of a small circle. I know I'm being kind of metaphorical there, but then if we imagine the advisors, right? If you're a president of a company or a nation and you have advisors and they're giving you decisions to make and papers and ask you if you want to sign this document or that document, or do you want to give money to this charity, or do you want to invest in this new product line, then they're setting the question, right? They're setting the context, and you're just giving an answer within a narrow context. If you wanted to say, wait a second, in this situation where you're the president of a company and you have these advisors, if you wanted to say, wait a second, how do I start to really think for myself here? How do I use my advisors more in a different way where I'm not just kicking them all out because now I just have myself and no advisors? That kind of just leaves me in a vacuum. That's not helpful, right? So in parallel, we're not trying to get rid of our mind, right? Then we have nothing left. We need to use our mind. So if we realize we need to use our advisors, we want to take advantage of them, but how do we get out from the kind of narrow context that they're giving us? Do we question the facts that they're giving us? And that's where I'm saying that isn't actually where the main place we're looking to focus here, especially at first. Instead, we want to think about something, I guess, deeper, we could call it, but where we're taking a look at what they're implying is important and think, is there anything they're not talking about that might be important? Maybe all of their decisions have to do with product lines and marketing, and then we say, what things might be being left out? How about the quality of the experience for our employees? Or the product stuff could involve research and development, or maybe it's not really. Maybe it's just people are coming to the company with product ideas and we're trying to figure out which ones to invest in. But maybe we should do our own R&D. And so if you start to think about what's being left out or what really should be important, and that's a very beginning of a question, that's not going to immediately give you the right answer just by asking a starting question like, well, let me try to think about what's important in the first place. But if you realize, but it's still a major revelation if you're this president of this company and you are dealing with your advisors and you're thinking of how to best really run the company and do your job as president, then realizing to think about, wait, what if their sense of what's important is totally baseless? It's like totally off. And I need to focus on that. I need to discover that instead of assuming by default that they have the importance all handled. And I just operate within the more narrow sense of assuming that they have the priorities right, and I'm just trying to figure out from the facts which decisions to make. So that's in helping you to run your own mind, have what's going to end up being control, but we're going to gain control through understanding rather than trying to go for it directly. So it's not really understanding versus control. It's, do you try to get control via understanding or just kind of go for it and try to bypass understanding? And even then, the control is very different. Control, once you understand, doesn't look anything like control when you don't understand. Well, I'm talking about understanding what's best for like everyone, and then it's not a question of who gets priority. Who, you know, often the idea of control means, do I get my needs met or do you get your needs met? Right? Do I get my priorities treated as priorities or yours? With understanding, you are getting everything right for everyone, in essence. So if you're the president of the company looking to do that, right, everyone's going to be better off, including your advisors, if you get things right. And if you're trying to figure out where to focus or where they're off, where your advisors are off, then focusing on their sense of importance is going to do it for you. And so realizing that about your own mind, if you want to figure out what results to go for in life, how to get those results, and how to be happy along the way, which pretty much covers all our bases, right? Then focusing, and as you focus on it, it's going to be pretty quick, especially outside of the context of alchemy already helping you and law of implication. It's going to be fairly quick to see I think that the sense of importance at least is off by default. And it may not be so much for you now, but in general for people, for sure it is. And there's got to be a significant amount of it still sitting in your mind and mine, because we're so surrounded by things that are by a screwed up sense of what's important and what isn't. All right, so you can look there, and then there's confidence, which I've referred to here and there. But it's not so much that you have your beliefs wrong or that you have your facts wrong, but however right or wrong your mind is about things, it's not really about you, but your mind's going to give you thoughts. And sometimes it's going to give you thoughts and it won't have any space for that thought being wrong. It's just going to give it to you as if it's most definitely right. I've used the example of like, that person's a jerk, right? Or that person's a good person. Or I should do this, or that person should do that. Sometimes your mind's going to give you thoughts like that, and it's not going to give you thoughts as if that's a question at all. It's just going to presume it and then move along to the real question at hand. Just like your advisors, if they say, all right, this person's a bad employee, this product is not working for us, and so we're looking to see if we can have one of these other two product lines. And in that way, I just presented it, right, as if I was an advisor. I didn't really present this product is bad or this employee is bad as a question. I just mentioned that and then moved along to the real question. So our mind will do that, but it won't even necessarily be right when it does that. But it'll feel like completely certain. It's those two places, the feeling of confidence in beliefs, answers, premises, and the feeling of importance. And those overlap, like saying that something's a priority or important, or just treating some things like they're totally unimportant, is in and of itself, there's confidence in that. Like if it feels like something's unimportant And if it feels like it's definitely, you also have a confidence level on how true it is that a particular topic in life or result in life is unimportant. Or even trying to understand somebody versus if you just think, look, I could just make this person do what I want. Why would I want to understand them? And it just feels very unimportant to understand them. Then you also have a confidence level in how unimportant it feels to understand them. So those are two places to look. And I basically had that on the slide to cover, and I ended up treating that pretty thoroughly. So good there. All of these things will be stuff that we can refer back to, and then I can point out as it comes up as we continue. So a number of times I'm going to give you building blocks that I can refer back to. I just wanted to point out, remind us, that there's a massive hint, strategic idea last webinar about going for the semi-soft lock. I'm going to move along because there's other things I'll talk about that'll help to illustrate this. But before I do, let's see just for a moment. In our search engine optimization coaching in No Holds Barred, which people listening may or may not be a part of, there's an idea of ranking a website for like my city SEO, meaning like Nashville SEO or Dallas SEO, right? SEO stands for search engine optimization. And sometimes people will look that term up. A business will look it up, and if you're ranking high, if your website comes up for that, that's good. And it's also something you can refer to if you're talking to someone, even if you meet them a different way. That is like going for like a semi-soft lock, or it's one angle on it. And if you're not familiar with this term, it's just I talked about it last time. But you're basically trying to find, when you're trying to get to a result, you're trying to think of what's the, and this relates to stacking, it relates to bottlenecks. You're trying to find the kind of easiest to get result that is going to give you enough of an advantage that if you perform competently from that point, then you'll almost certainly get your result. There's different ways to put this. Another is just to say that you're going for a result that is going to be able to be stacked. It's going to be able, it's like alchemy, you're going to be able, it's an ingredient now, you're going to be able to mix in, and it's going to help you get toward that result in the future. Like your future actions will be, I'll use the word that first came to mind, potentiated, and many people might know that, but either way, made stronger. Like if you rank a website for your city SEO, or you could just make an affiliate site or rank for, this is true almost about any ranking that you do. If you make a website and rank even for this is what I like about SEO, is these kind of semi-soft locks, these stackable milestones or whatever, building blocks are abound. So you can rank for terms that are that aren't too tough. And what the thing with these semi-soft locks is not just to recognize them, but to you can really channel your resources into achieving that first. So you can kind of go all in on getting to a fairly easy result, but that can stack, that you can use, that the next result you go for, the next building block that you go to make after that, a second building block, it'll be even easier because you got the first one, and this first one keeps on helping you, right, all the time. The fact that you've ranked a website gives you, well, it can give you some confidence, but I'm going to get to that, where we don't necessarily want to build confidence that way exactly, but you'll have knowledge of how you ranked it. It'll be an actual resource you can show to people. You'll learn stuff, and you can do a better job ranking. You can go for a more difficult term, and you'll have experience that'll help you go for it, and so forth. There's a way that, although this is somewhat obvious after it's explained, it isn't. In practice, it isn't. People don't realize to do it very specifically. People tend to get fixated people want to get to a result where it's like they can just go downhill, like they want. It's easy to see when people want to go for like a gatekeeper or someone to give them an in to a company or to get a job, or if people are dating and there's a person that they're attracted to, then they think of going and what can they say to that person. Whereas there's a very effective like group theory with dating where instead you get to know the people around that person, right? And even create a whole context in that place that you're in and so forth. With meeting different, even you can even meet someone that doesn't know that person at all, get to know a couple people, then you're kind of in there socially with the event, then you can introduce the people you met to the friend or the group, including the girl that you're interested in or the guy, and you see you operate by context. Shima had a question about context and what I mean by it. That's one more indication of it, and I'll keep looking to explain that better what I mean. So operating in the context, looking for what you're doing in context is you're looking for stackable. Is a little bit redundant, but stackable building blocks. You're looking the way to just constantly win in life, and this really gets to the heart of the matter regarding strategy. It's pretty fascinating because with strategy, you have limited resources always. There's no strategy if you have unlimited resources. If that makes sense, you just kind of you just do it, right? So strategy kind of inherently you have limited resources and you're trying to get a result and you're not quite sure also for sure how to get the result. Right? Again, you don't need strategy if the result's right there and you already could just reach out and get it. So in every case where strategy is called for, you have limited resources, you're not quite sure how to get the result. And of course this happens all the time in life. And somehow the way our minds work by default, it just isn't that obvious to people. People will stumble across this all the time. If you want to search your memory for evidence that you've done this in the past, you'll find it. But we also don't do it a lot. And we also would just pretty much never be worried or panicked if we realized we could just always do this as a bottom line method. Is you find something, anything that's going to stack, and you channel your limited resources into that. Now that's different than spending. We'll constantly in life have these kind of continuous resources like our time, our focus, right, is a resource that's like flowing like a river, right, where we spend it some way or another way, kind of like an annual budget for a government agency. You spend it or you don't. If you have a non-renewable resource like a certain fixed amount of cash, then you don't necessarily spend it all, or social capital, right, or favors that you can call it. You don't necessarily spend all of that on one building block, but you can spend some, right? You get a sense, right, of how much is this building block going to do for me, and so forth. And you need to get there. You either need that building block or some building block. So you have to spend enough to get to some next building block. But when you learn to see things in terms of stacking, and I need to constantly what I need to do in alchemy is help to see the opposite. Like what is it that people do instead of stacking? And we can see this pretty easily when it comes to this like shiny object syndrome when people want to make money. I'm sure we could do a similar example with dating or any kind of relationship and business relationships and so forth. But if people want to buy a product and hope that that product is going to make them money, right? Like kind of as a whole source. Then they might go, they buy it, they try it for a little while, see if they feel like doing it, see if it seems like it's getting them results right away. Or maybe people are really invested into it, which could be even worse if it doesn't help them then. But then the end result is that they never really had a sense of whether something would stack. They were trying to get something that that it was like a source that could get them to their result. They might still need to work it, but there's a way that it would be downhill. In essence, people want. I was going to relate it to local peak theory, but they want to sort of, I don't know if I want to say, feel like they're on the right mountain, or almost like local peak theory almost leaves out this semi-soft lock idea. So it's like invisible. It also tends to be invisible when people have a distance, like a spatial and distance metaphor for goal achievement. I've heard from different people, gurus and so forth. Like it's like flying a plane. You want to take off. You want to have an idea of your destination, and then you want to keep making corrections until you get there. Right? You see, it's like this navigation metaphor for reaching your goals. And there we go. And that's what's going on by default with the way that our mind looks at goals. Is it has an idea of a goal, and then it tries to navigate there. And now that inside of navigating towards a goal, it'll create goals for feedback, where there's something where there's like an indication that you're getting closer, but and in our dating metaphor, when a girl is saying that that you're really great, or hopping into bed with you, or with money getting, with the shiny object syndrome, then people want to see that money's coming in, or that something really close to that is happening. But within that, you're trying to get closer, like with this distance metaphor. But you see, closer doesn't involve stacking. The idea of stacking advantages or ingredients, or getting to the semi-soft lock, and that the whole point of it is that it adds into the rest of your efforts. There's a general sense of potential sense of momentum that people want to get, but a lot of that momentum ends up being something I'm going to get to, which is like based on inference or confidence, where people might feel like they're getting momentum if a girl validates them or hops into bed with them, or if they're making money, then that increases their confidence and momentum. But going for the semi-soft lock is a bit of it's a different way of looking at it, where and it might already be apparent, is why I stopped there for a second, but it's not really about. I mean, we can pretty easily see that if you're just trying to build confidence by seeing that things appear to be working, there's just all sorts of room for wrong feedback. That you have this goal to interpret feedback in a certain way that keeps your momentum, and so you can actually be like more and more wrong. Easy to see with the dating, easy to see with chasing after shiny objects, where you're trying to build confidence by getting a result that you yourself define. It's almost like you're incentivized to kind of come up with a result that you can. I was going to say like see, like kind of. You're almost determining what feedback you want to get when you're trying to build confidence that way, in a way that really isn't useful. You're trying to come up with stuff, and this can happen subconsciously, like outside of you realizing it. But your mind's going to come up with these types of feedback that you can maybe get, but it's more based on things it's kind of circular, like it'll build your confidence, but it doesn't necessarily stack to get you where you want to go. Even if you make money with a make money system, you can do that in a way that won't really stack. Like you can join a network marketing company and sell some product, get a couple people under you as like distributors, right? Like a multi-level company, and you can get a check coming in, and all of it might lead nowhere, right? Like, and it often does, just in practice. Not really making a judgment one way or the other about multi-level marketing methods or companies, but it just in actual reality, you can get a check and make some money, but it's not going to stack. But it can feel like you're making progress. So, so what's happening? I think I can kind of bring this to a nice conclusion here. When you're looking to make this sort of distance metaphor progress, when by default what's going on is there's a whole number of things that can look like progress, some of which will stack and some of which won't. And it's really going to end up being about which of those is easier to achieve based on kind of what you already understand. Not like ultimately easier to achieve, but which like seems easier to achieve. So again, there's right answers and there's wrong answers. Within a scenario, you're looking to make money. You don't know how to start. Someone approaches you about multi-level marketing, and you sounds good. You have products, you have a marketing system, training, and you just kind of have to supply the traffic. They said they give you like kind of product and the conversion mechanism, and you just have to get it in front of people. Is the idea, and then you start doing that, and you can get some amount of money coming in. That looks like progress. So it's one example of something that reasonably looks like progress, but it may not stack. It may not. So something now an example of something that stacks is if we were to understand differently, where our monetization is based on probably the first thing we want to stack with probably is offer, building an offer. Perhaps it could work. There's three possible places, as far as I can tell, is a traffic source, which is a valid place to start. You could start with, okay, I have traffic of this sort. There's a place for rent that's open, like an office, a retail space in a place where there's going to be foot traffic. Then you could start with that idea, and then you could think about, and of course it could be a website that you rank for some keywords. You get traffic, and then you would need to stack offer or conversion, right? Some people are really good at conversion, understand it very well, so they can start there. What can I sell, or something like that, and then they kind of stack on an offer, like find an offer to fulfill it. Or with conversion, they might like ask, what is it that people want? And they kind of have a good sense of a pitch that would work. And then you find a way to get traffic to it. They pay for traffic, let's say, and then you connect it to a product. What I explained there about the stacking with the offer, traffic, conversion, when you look at it that way, and where you have to get to all three working very well, then you can look for things that are going to kind of permanently help you stack with that. And then with the semi-soft lock idea, you are looking for the place that if you really channel your focus and resources reasonably into it, where do you want to channel that first, so that you have something where once you have that, what you need to do then at that point is you need to be competent, but you're going to have a significant advantage. Like if you're just competent from that point, you'll basically succeed, especially because you can iterate this semi-soft lock idea. You just ask once you achieve the first thing. So the first thing might be something to do with your offer, and it might not be getting a whole offer, you see, and that's kind of the difference between a soft lock and a semi-soft lock. But something where it's going to help you build value, and I'll get more into this when we go specifically through an offer. But the characteristics of it is you're looking for something that genuinely once you achieve that, you're going to be able to stand on it or stack with it or use it as an ingredient consistently, that the rest of your efforts are going to be better off, rather than that it just looks like progress, but it isn't stackable. So bottom line, there's a lot of potential things that can feel like progress or look like progress. Some of those are stackable, some of those are not. And by not having that distinction, is normally how it is for people. They can't distinguish between what's stackable and what isn't. They don't realize too. And so they go after something where it's like so big with some things are so big and obvious that if you get there, that you can probably win. And then so people will go for that rather than realize to look more closely at much smaller advantages. But when people try to look at smaller advantages, they get confused and don't distinguish between progress and a stackable advantage. And again, to compensate for that, another incorrect thing people will do is they go for way too big of an advantage. And I illustrated this also with the dating and the social thing, where people often don't realize they can talk to someone else in an event or a party, get to know them a little bit, then merge that group over to the group where the girl you're interested in is, and then get to know the friend and so forth, and then get to know the girl. They'll mistake other things like just being complimented by people and being told they're good looking or attractive or just someone laughing at their joke for progress, because it'll make them feel more attractive and more confident, but that isn't getting them closer to that girl, right? Or they will go straight after the girl directly. So again, they either go for the whole enchilada, or which is too difficult in many cases. Of course, sometimes we achieve it, but then plenty of other times we don't, and then we feel like we don't know whether we can achieve results. When you know to look for things this way, you look for something in context that's small but stackable. And with making money with search engine optimization, that's why it's so reliable, is because it's so easy to find those things, because you can just start ranking for medium or longer tail keywords, or your city SEO or whatever. Another way to put it is so many things that look like progress when it comes to search engine optimization are progress. Now, tricks that might work for a little while and stop working mostly aren't progress. So when people are going for tricks with SEO, these super secret methods of zooming your website right up, that if Google finds out, they'll kill your website, and then they're always trying to close those loopholes, and it makes you feel paranoid because you're using them. That's more of an example of going for the soft lock, not the semi-soft lock. Cotton has great instincts for this. He did things very smartly this way. He just kept stacking and stacking and got to massive results. And the more you see this, and you probably are seeing it pretty reasonably clearly right now, and it's probably giving you a calm sense of confidence about how you can achieve things in life, because you just approach everything this way. And again, understand that there's going to be, when you start out going after a result, there's going to be a bunch of things that by default are going to feel like progress that are not. So you want to plan and think and use scenarios when you think. And you want to get a good sense of what really will stack and what really won't. Like you imagine, okay, I get this result. Let's say some person laughs at my jokes, or some good-looking girl laughs at my jokes. And of course, I'm just not going to repeat girl or guy every time, right, in my scenarios. Obviously, it can work either way. But you imagine you're a guy, right? You imagine it, or you're going after a guy, regardless of what gender you are. And the attractive member of the sex the gender you're interested in laughs at your jokes, and you feel like you're making progress. But that isn't necessarily actual progress. There could be nervous laughter, and you don't want to hear it. You don't want to notice that. It could be that you're funny, but it has nothing to do with them wanting to have a relationship with you. And so when you think that through, you think, well, can I stack with that? Now, maybe you could if you're prepared to, Maybe if someone's laughing at your jokes, that's part of stacking for you. But you want to think it through and go after things where there are ingredients that you can use to build in the future that aren't just about your confidence. So I think I've dealt with that well for now, and mostly can be dealt with in discussion at this point, or I'll refer back to it when there's things will come up, and I'll point out how it's an example of this or takes advantage of this distinction. Okay, let's go here. This is kind of a thing that I was thinking about today when I woke up this morning, a couple of hours before the webinar, so I wanted to deal with this to some degree. I think what I was going to read to you, I'll probably do next webinar, which gets us ahead for the next webinar. Have that planned out. That'll be when I say read to you, I'm not just going to read a lot, but we can read a little bit and discuss. Read a little bit and discuss something next time. Let's see here. Okay, but let's just talk about this, and then we'll go to discussion. I probably referenced the idea of going for method versus source when it comes to your ideas, your knowing. Really, this is basically fundamental to every moment of your life. But I also, what I'm really trying to get to is a different idea, a better distinction is what I should say, which is the understanding versus inferring. And the reason this matters so much has to do with, again, the main topic that we're dealing with here in phase 2, both main topics. But with our self-image, there's a major inefficiency that you're almost certainly dealing with to some significant degree in life. And it's one of the major things that I'm looking to switch for you in alchemy. If you do, then your effectiveness, efficiency, happiness, ability to get results is going to skyrocket. And it has to do with the sense that we're stacking. Now I can use that term well. That the main way to stack or a big ingredient in achieving our results is our self-confidence or our confidence, and that we are. It becomes very important to us to reinforce our self-confidence. Same thing with our kids, where it's important to reinforce their self-confidence. And that the idea is that we bring that constantly into our interactions, that it helps us to project a better public image that people will use to make decisions about us and whether to hire us or have personal business relationships with us, romantic relationships with us. And there's some major errors. There's obviously something to that's correct, right? But then, which is the case, right? Remember I talked about clusters last time? There's something that we need regarding confidence in ourselves, certainly in terms of our public image is necessary. Clearly, if I had a horrendous public image right now, if you guys thought I was an idiot, untrustworthy, gross, etc., then that would be a total stumbling. We wouldn't get to square one, right, with alchemy. You wouldn't be listening in the first place. So clearly it matters. And so there's a cluster, like I talked about last time, where there's things that really matter about our public image. There's things that can matter or that we're trying to get from our self-image. But we need to start to distinguish the elements of that, because there's all sorts of very counterproductive and expensive things that we do for dealing with our self-image. And also our self-image tends to be composed of these norms and standards that I've been talking about that are like these super goals and meta goals. And it also, our limiting beliefs are inherent to our self-image as well. I talked about how we want when part of what we're trying to do when we're achieving a result is stack our self-confidence into it, that keeps the best way to maintain your self-confidence is to stay within your box, right? With alchemy, if we excuse me, if we stayed within certain boxes, then I could feel more confident because I could structure things in a clear way, and you could feel like things are fitting right in and feel good. The only problem is we would fail. Other than that, it would appear great, it would feel great. But the answers to the issues that we're dealing with in alchemy are not in the box. They're not in any box that we're already in, basically. They're not even in the box that I'm in. Like, I need to expand and develop and innovate in order to bridge things to you and to get things better for myself. I'm learning and expanding and helping myself by doing alchemy, by doing this series, right? By doing the 3 months or so, 3 or 4 months I spent. Of course, I spent almost a lifetime, but then also I dedicated about 3 months to developing alchemy before I even announced it, and then now that I'm in the middle of doing it with the live webinars, I'm having to expand outside my box, and the box I'm already in, and you guys are needing to. And the success lies outside of boxes that we're in. So one of the huge costs, there's a number of costs and problems with this self-confidence attempt to stack with our self-confidence, which is mainly it constantly makes us feel like staying within the box. And people will sometimes compare, and people are wildly so grateful and appreciative by how this is going, and so people are being totally positive. But on once in a while, or on some level, people will kind of intuitively compare or think, especially early on. I don't think even at this point so much, but with alchemy, that maybe it could be like structured in a way that is where people understand, okay, what am I supposed to get from this webinar? There's a certain discrete number of slides. It'll take a certain amount of time to describe, and with clear examples, and then that's that, and then we go to step 2 and step 3 and step 4. So there's advantages to that, but sorry, I'm not sure how I skipped back to that. I was talking about benefits, and then also we'll be talking about drawbacks with the self-image thing. So when we're trying to stack with that, and that would even stack, right? If I had presented things that way early on, there would be a certain way that helped, right? Where in terms of, again, people have been retained great, but probably some people might have a presentation like that and feel even more confidence in me next time if I had things structured that way. And the only problem, as I said, is that, so it has real advantages, and I'd like to have those advantages too, and I'll probably get to that in the future. But currently, the answers are, or that's outside of the box for me to some degree, that I didn't already know everything. If I stayed fully within my comfort zone and created something like that, there are just things that I just it wasn't possible for me essentially to do that, and at the same time get to where I was trying to get to. Every time I would try to get to where I know I wanted to get, I wouldn't find it within just what I could put in structured slides, step 1, step 2, step 3. I could have created stuff like that. I know enough stuff that I could create that and make a whole course based on a structure like that, and I could fill it with stuff. But the result that I was going for would constantly not be in there, right? So it just wasn't possible. I would have to choose one or the other, and I did. But there may be a time when the result that I'm going for is fully within a box that I'm able to structure. But until and unless it is, then I have to choose one or the other. Just like I woke up today with additional clarity and stuff that was outside of the previous box or slides that I had for today, and I could either talk as if I didn't have these thoughts and this new clarity, or I do talk about it, but it's not structured. It'll mess with the previous structure, right? It's one or the other. So with self-confidence, the way to maintain your self-confidence is by staying within your box. And so you'll feel that pressure. And then the problem is, when we try to go for results or potentially go for results, when I say potentially, before we kind of decide to go for a result, there's the question of what do we go for, right? So there might be goals or objectives that would really be great for you to achieve, but you don't even think about going for them because they're so far outside the box currently for you. So we're stuck in a trap regarding self-confidence where we lose it. We risk it when we go outside the box, but there's a real benefit to it. So what we need to do, it's not as simple as just throwing it out, because in another sense we sort of need it, or we need some elements of it. If I had no sense of confidence in these webinars, that wouldn't be very helpful, right? If you're doing anything in business and you have no sense of confidence in yourself and so forth, then that's no good, right? Obviously. So what do we do? And then I have had the thought for a while that's the method versus source. And this is a very profound idea, but I then even have additional clarity, which is found on the second line, understanding versus inferring, to try to explain what I intuitively mean or sort of feel from this. But this method versus source thing, as it's understood, including understanding the next thing and so forth, but this ultimately contains an unbelievably critical idea, that there's a way that people are constantly, when it comes to both their self-image and with your knowledge, people are looking for what I call a source, where it's like they, and this even is sort of is parallel to that semi-soft lock versus soft lock or hard lock idea, where like if someone's looking for a client to say yes and give them money, and that's like step one for somebody, or that's the next thing they're trying to get to, and they don't have the sensibility to stack towards it really, then it's like they want to sort, like they're not paying attention to the method of stacking. They want a person to take care of it for them, right? They want a person to say yes and give them a check each month. Or if someone's dating, right? People are looking for a source, and they'll meet someone, they'll get so excited. Why? They'll get so excited because you'd already be excited. If you had a method that you knew was going to work, you'd already be excited. You wouldn't need another person to excite you. I mean, you would find another person and they would excite you in a happy way, but it wouldn't be this source type of thing where you're like, oh my God, I found this, like this person means I can be happy and I can have a relationship now. If you have the method straight, then the result's just going to come. And it's a totally different situation, and it's wonderful. But if you look at how people operate in practice, sure, they use method to some degree, but they also drive it to San Francisco, like I say. They don't recognize this distinction clearly, and we default constantly to looking for a source. So people meet a romantic partner, or they get a client to sign on with them, right? And or whatever other thing. There's just two examples, potential examples. And they'll feel so excited because, and why would they feel so excited? Because they feel like the stepping stone to success, or the gateway to success, lies through finding the right source. It's the same reason why people buy multiple shiny object products in trying to make money. They're looking for a source. You can still buy products. Of course, we have products at OMG that I believe in and that are effective. But when you're dealing with method, first of all, someone thinking more along the lines of method will recognize OMG differently and say, yeah, okay, that's what I'm looking for. But when people want a source, it's like they want something they can like eat that's like ready-made, right? Instead of a cookbook, this is just a broad metaphor that isn't perfect, but instead of a cookbook, they want a prepared meal, right? And it's not that finding a reliable source for something is a problem. It's that having it be your foundation is a problem. And using it at the wrong times, which is a lot it's the wrong time, then that's a big problem. Getting this distinction will be unbelievable in life, because when you base your results, your success, and the results you're going to go for, and your happiness, right? Again, there's kind of three related things. There's what results you want to go for. There's getting those results, and then there's your happiness along the way. When that's all based on method, and I'm going to mean it's going to boil down to, or as we dig deeper, it's going to relate to understanding versus inferring, and the inferring is going to be kind of probably a big distinction for you, because as is a continuing theme, as I referenced several times, is that alchemy is not going to be that helpful for you until and unless I contrast it with the wrong way that seems right, the default way that's been going on a lot for you and me, and that seems correct but isn't. It's when I point that out that the biggest aha moments come. Just telling you the right answer basically doesn't give you the right answer. You get the right answer when you see the wrong answer that looks right, or that looked right, and see how and why it looked right, and see how and why the correct answer is right. So we do want to have a certain accurate sense of confidence, right, in something in order to project a public image of confidence, which certainly matters, because other people are looking for sources, right? Part of understanding how to get things right for ourselves and distinguishing default versus the correct way of understanding things is to also recognize, to understand, if you understand default, not only do you not do it for yourself when you don't want to, but you realize that other people are generally operating by default. You don't realize that in any kind of condescending way whatsoever, just that it's going on, and that unless someone's actively understands differently, they're going to be looking for a source. And that's why having the right public image really does matter a lot. But you can base your self-image on understanding, on method, which is based on understanding. People don't realize this, so they base their self-image as if it's like a source also, but the wrong type of source, where they're trying to infer that their self-image is good, smart, etc. And inferring is basically how your brain thinks by default, and I'll directly describe it in a second, but I'm just giving some context to it. So it's trying to infer a good self-image for yourself that is crushing you. It's crushing your confidence, and it's wildly expensive and focus intensive. If you understand how to not do this, how to do this properly, you will have a much stronger self-image, and it will be wildly less expensive and focus intensive. Expensive in every type of resource: focus, money, creative focus, if you like thinking about your brain, who knows what else, physical energy, other types of time, like where you're doing stuff. Right, like at least three things can happen that we can all call your time. It could be your attentive conscious focus, there's your brain processing, and then you could just physically be doing stuff, right? All in time. But just every sort of, yeah, it's expensive in terms of just like capital, like relationship capital with other people to try to feed to try to infer a higher self-image for yourself. You have to spend relationship capital constantly to do so too. So it's wildly expensive and much less effective than basing your self-image on method and understanding. As you gain this distinction more, and it's a, you'll gain it. It's a kind of thing you can build, and we're doing that directly now, and we'll continue to. And that's what this phase 2 thing is essentially all about. Is if you base your self-image on this understanding and method, then you have a very different type of confidence. Think about the semi-soft lock method of getting results, and then we can compare and contrast it with an inference method of getting results. In order to feel certain, or let's just say confident, in order to feel confident that you can rank a website or that you can make money by doing search engine optimization of some sort, or not by doing that, but as that's one of the ingredients that you could stack with search engine optimization and build monetization on top of that. If you think in terms of method, where you say, okay, can I really focus some limited resources like money, and particularly my various time-based resources, my attention, my brain's creative focus on what it's working on, my actions, like with my hands typing and so forth. If I really focus, can I get to something that's going to give me an advantage I can stack on? Can I rank for a medium length keyword? Or can I just start trying to rank for that, and can I get there eventually, maybe for a different keyword than I originally went for? Maybe I start by trying to build a site and trying to rank, and I screw it all up big time. And then can I then stack off of that screw up and do it right? Probably. Given let's presume that you're in our SEO coaching program at No Holds Barred. You just use a different example otherwise, right? Same thing with heck, forget about the dating. Let's say you're in a relationship. Let's say you're married. Can I have a better relationship? Well, is there one thing that will be an ingredient that will help my current relationship be better, that if I focus on, I can do? Right? How about, foot massages, or just massages, or shoulder massages, or something that are given consistently? And maybe not. Maybe that in your particular relationship, that's not the thing. But could you find some small thing that's stackable that will help your relationship? And it might not just be catering to the other person. It could be getting a little bit better at being respectfully aggressive, as I'll talk about in the future. But whatever it might be, is there something, listening to the other person for 15 minutes a day. And you don't have to pull out a stopwatch and tell them that you're doing it, but just do it without saying it. Like listen to them an extra 15 minutes, or just spend 5 minutes on your own imagining you're that person in an immersive way, and thinking about what as that person, what you might want, and so forth. And again, I'll also be covering that more specifically about how to do that more correctly. But is there some stackable thing in your existing relationship that you can do that if you focus in on it, and you have enough resources to do so, that it can start to stack and make your relationship even better? And if not, then can you focus in on figuring one of those things out, right? It wouldn't be that hard to do. Probably even generic relationship books, if you read over them, they'll probably give you a whole bunch of ideas that are correct that you could use to stack. So, and what I'm doing now is giving examples of this semi-soft lock method. And I'm using the semi-soft lock method as an example of method in general. It's just one example. It's not the only method. It's an example of a method. But it's also, in a sense, one angle on the method for like strategy, the semi-soft lock method, the stackable idea, including breaking bottlenecks also stacks. just kind of building blocks and bottlenecks, and you stack by either getting a new building block or by breaking a bottleneck. And either one of those you can think of as a semi-soft block. And that if you and the question to ask yourself is, if I channel into that with dedicated channeled focus and some resources, can I very likely achieve it? And if not, split it up, find something smaller. So again, so that's an example or an instance of method. Can you notice how being aware of that method will build your confidence without any inference? So here's what an inference is. An inference is the sun rises on Monday, the sun rises on Tuesday, the sun rises on Wednesday, and you figure the sun will rise on Thursday, right? An inference is a girl laughs at your jokes, and you infer that you're funny, right? Or someone agrees to do some next stage of dating with you, holding your hand, getting coffee with you, jumping into bed with you, whatever, and you infer that you are better. Or a client says yes, or a client agrees to a meeting, or a client agrees to the next stage of contact, and you infer that your client getting methods are working. You feel more, or you infer that you're making progress on the way to money getting, and so you feel more confident based on that feedback. So inference is based on feedback. It's a totally normal way to live. It is how brains work, literally. Brains work on feedback. They come to conclusions based on inference, based on, right? There's a few baseline instincts that you get started with as an infant, and then you learn about the world from there. Learning is based on feedback. It's based on inputs, responses, expectations, seeing if your expectations are met. If you cry and your mother comes and hugs you and feeds you, then you expect that to happen in the future. And you infer whether the world is a reasonably caring place and safe place based on stuff like that, right? And that gets stuck in people's minds and their worldview and their image of themselves and the world. Whether they're lovable is inferred at a very young age. Inferred. But inference it's the right way for a non-conscious brain to keep you alive. It's the only way. And it is a method, but and that's the problem with method versus source, is these words their meaning can overlap in a way that can give you the wrong idea. In the way that I feel it and mean it, it's correct. But it can be interpreted in different ways that again that means those words can have different meanings than I exactly mean. But understanding versus inference is less overlap, and will additionally clarify what I'm trying to get to here. So I'm guessing that you're having some ahas and you're seeing this. It's probably fairly tangible. Where if you're trying to make money, or you're trying to date, or you're trying to be in a relationship that you're currently in, feeling loved based on inference, then and the other problem with this inference is, let's say you're trying to feel loved in a relationship, but you're also trying to maintain your dignity and your self confidence for many other reasons. Then how do we maintain our self confidence? We set goals that we think we can achieve. So let's suppose that our partner gives us inputs that we interpret, very possibly incorrectly, but we interpret as they're not quite so much into us anymore. Then in order to maintain your self-confidence, through inference, through getting inputs and feedback that you're succeeding, are you going to want to strive to be loved by this person who seems to be pulling away. No, you'll dumb down your goal. Of course, in some cases, people will for other reasons. But the one of the vectors, one of the tugs on a person, if the other person seems to be not as interested, then we'll want to pull away ourselves to maintain our self-confidence because we want to go for a goal we can achieve. And if we think we can't achieve the goal of being loved by this person that we're in a relationship with, then we're going to want to find some other way to feel loved. Or at least we'll just pull away from all of it. But people might, let's say someone has children. Maybe if they feel like it's easier to feel loved by their children than by their spouse, then they'll focus there more, right? They'll just be kind of a random fluctuation, like the stock market has random fluctuations, right? Just by the nature of how life is and events and what's going on. And they might get signals over a little bit of time from their spouse. Their spouse is not as much interested in them. And that could be the case, but it could also just be random fluctuations. In order to maintain their self-confidence, they might want to look for feedback in sources where they get reinforced better, such as their children. Of course, even worse would be, or it could be in business. They just focus in business more, or it can be an alternative relationship source, romantic source, right? Whatever it might be, in order to preserve our self-confidence, we'll want to focus somewhere else if we're trying to build our self-image through inference. If we understand things very differently, then we can maintain and build our romantic relationship through method. So instead of getting our self-confidence through needing feedback from our romantic partner that they love us, then we use method to create the right circumstances. The more we understand, right, this person married you in the first place. So in the vast majority of cases, and they also have all sorts of incentives, right, to stay with you, to like you. So they like you in the first place, plus they have all sorts of incentives to stay liking you. Given that, you already have so much on your side. You've already got the semi-soft lock. If you now, through method, in many cases, for other reasons, it might be impossible. Just in some cases, a person might just be fully gone, fully unreachable. But regardless whether that's the case, if you use the best method, if you set your relationship up for success, and you rely on, in general, on method, not self-confidence, including if your self-confidence in business is based in method, if your belief about getting results in general is based on your understanding of how to get results, and your reflective, your self-knowledge, whatever, that your confidence is based on method rather than inference of seeing yourself succeed. Because again, what's the easiest way to see yourself succeed? Dumb down your goals and delete and marginalize feedback that is contrary to feedback that you're being successful, right? So you distort feedback so it's interpreted to give you more self-confidence, and you dumb down your goals. That's how people normally maintain their self-confidence, and with obvious massive drawbacks. And like I just illustrated about in a relationship where they'll look for other places, other sources to get the right feedback that they want in order, when I say the right, in quotes, the right feedback. When you're based on method, then you're not so susceptible. You don't need to protect your self-image, which is so costly, right? And instead, so you're not so touchy. You're not so vulnerable. You're not like a bunch of landmines yourself, which only exacerbates the problem, right, in a relationship. And business is a whole bunch of relationships too, right? Your money getting, whether you're going to take action on writing a website, which has not much relationship, just you're working on tech, that's going to be based on your self-confidence, which can either be inference or method, right? If it's based on method, if you're going, then if you understand, okay, look, technology is a matter of what to type and where to click, right? And you continue, and also by realizing that your self-image can be based on method, then your sense of importance about methods totally changes. So you focus on method. So your methods get better. Remember I said in the first slide, I said your sense of importance is all jacked up, all screwed up from your mind, most likely. Mine certainly was and isn't perfect still, but I've been working on it and making progress, which shows me how far I had to come, right? And I'm still making progress. Anyhow, with this sense of importance of things. But method doesn't seem very important when your whole idea of progress in life is based on inference and self-confidence based on inference. So instead, what do people want to do when it comes to technology and learning stuff? They don't want to learn new things. They want to give up or get frustrated with technology because they're getting feedback. They're trying, without realizing it, they're trying to build their self-confidence through inference, through feedback that they're succeeding. They'll go to learn something or try a new application or piece of technology, and instead of focusing on method and building method, they're focused on inference, self-confidence, building self-confidence that way. They don't see themselves succeeding. They feel avoidance from that because we feel the sense of avoidance. Eye-opening, right? Eye-opening as heck, probably. And the cost is just tremendous. And the opportunity cost is tremendous, meaning the lost opportunities, the things that we don't go after that we could, because we don't want to get the feedback that we're not succeeding. When we're just following a method that fundamentally works, and that's why the deepest methods are meta strategies and such are so important, because when we have the deepest methods in place, for example, that you remember I've talked about, you can respond to all feedback through either appreciation or curiosity. There's nowhere else to look. That can be one of your deepest methods in life. When you have that method, you have you have confidence because you know how to deal with anything, appreciation or curiosity. So you can deal with anything in a kind of a deep way. You don't have the specifics from that, but you have the great thing about deep meta strategies is that the drawback is they don't give you specifics. But the benefit is that you can always fall back. You have something to stand on no matter what, and then you can build up from there. Right? If you could always live with your parents, then you know if you won't, and they'll feed you, then you'll know I'm not saying that's the case, but let's just say that is the case. It is just an illustration. You have something to fall back on. The details might not be how you want, but at least you can build back up from there. So no matter how far you fall, you at least have food and shelter, and you can build back up from there. I'm stipulating, I'm giving you a scenario in which that's the case. I'm not saying it is the case for you or not, that you can live with your parents and they'll feed you. But so if you have something to fall back on, then at least you have that to fall back on, and you're never totally stuck, which is key. So in one sense, that's the deepest method, and that's just a reframe essentially on seeking understanding, or it's just kind of an additional clarity, another angle, not really a reframe, but a different angle on seeking understanding is the idea of appreciation or curiosity. And then this semi-soft lock idea gives you even more clarity on what to do. Now for a specific task, like ranking a website, then you can have a specific method geared toward that. But the drawback, the benefit to specific methods is, of course, they have very immediately useful details. The drawback is they apply to less things, right? They're more specific. So specificity has benefits and it has drawbacks. Just like zooming in, like using a magnifying glass or a microscope, has benefits in that you see what you're looking at better, and it has a drawback if you don't see the rest of things better, right? Though, what isn't the stuff that's off the screen you don't see. So you want to have the deepest methods, and those are light on details, and then you develop specific methods, realizing that specific methods won't always apply, and then you don't need to try to develop confidence in specific methods through inference. Again, you can build them from deeper methods, and the way things are going to turn out is that you will continue to use inference. I also call it successive approximation. I'll continue to develop this idea over time. You will use it. Your brain uses it by default. It is not bad. But the law of implication states that you want to focus on what you can know and keep building from there. Another angle on the law of implication is that it is a clarification or an additional clarification of the law of attraction. The law of attraction is that like thoughts are things and they attract the results into your life that you think about and focus on. That needs to be clarified. That the law of attraction, as I stated, and maybe someone would state it differently, but as I stated it, it is a cluster that is partially correct, partially incorrect, or whatever. You have to zoom in on it a little bit better. And the law of implication zooms in on it and gets it more accurate, which is which is that we will manifest or attract. Well, I'm going to clarify manifest because we don't exactly manifest. We attract the implication of our thoughts, meaning what has to be true based on our thoughts. I mentioned this when I talked about helplessness in the very first webinar or two for alchemy. And I talked about how the root of what has to be true based on how people think and act is that they're fundamentally helpless, and then they're only not helpless because they have various resources. If someone says, I have power because I have these resources, then that means they're powerless without them, or they have greatly diminished power without them. So it actually implies helplessness, and so you attract what helplessness attracts instead of what you might think you're attracting. When people have this self-confidence, but it's based on inference, it's really based on something like a weak, and it'll attract all sorts of things that aren't so good. Now, another clarification with the law of attraction is that the implication of your thoughts is not the only factor in the specific results that you get at any time. There's also an environment out there, random factors that are random or arbitrary regarding yourself and your thoughts. And so you can't judge someone's thoughts by the results they get only, like especially in a one-shot type of thing. You can come to valid conclusions about someone's methods by watching them over time, and even from one particular thing, you can get some sense of things, but not quite how we might think. But sorry, let me make sure I kind of tie my thoughts together here. I was saying there's the law of attraction that like thoughts are things, and we get what we focus on, or what we focus on ends up creating reality. Then there's a law of implication distinction, which is that we actually what we attract is the implication of our thoughts, not our thoughts. Another illustration of that is you call a bill the Affordable Care Act, but by the kind of caricature. I'm not saying this is what any actual teacher of the law of attraction means. By the way, I'm not in any way imputing that on them. But a caricature or a mistaken understanding of the law of attraction would be analogous to saying because we call it the Affordable Care Act, it's going to make healthcare more affordable just by the fact that that's our intention, right? That's like, but people think that intentionality really matters. This is like I talked about with scenarios, right? Intention is like when if you don't think in scenarios, merely having intention, but without taking action in your own thinking by thinking in scenarios, then you're not going to attract what you intend. You're going to attract what has to be true based on your thoughts and so forth. And that if that's a little confusing, that's what we should expect. It opens up. It's a massive distinction. The law of implication is a massive distinction from the law of attraction. It opens up an entire massive new field of, well, how do we know what's true? Well, good. Well, that's in one sense, the central question. It's not a tiny, unimportant thing we wave our hand at. It's it's in one sense the whole enchilada is how do we know what's true. So the massive distinction regarding the law of attraction is that we have to know what's true because it's the implicate. We have to know what's implied by our thoughts, not just like in other words, in order to understand the effect of the Affordable Care Act, just as an example, we need to know what's in the bill and what the actual real-world effects of the bill would have to be logically, just to kind of put it in kind of colloquial but understandable terms, right? The effects of the Affordable Care Act will be based on the logical consequences of the actual content of the bill, not the title of the bill. But really people very often act as if the title or the intention or their willpower, that just by a direct act of will they can understand something. Remember I talked about playing to win. Playing to win is like that. You don't just title your actions, I'm playing to win. That's like calling something the Affordable Care Act. Right? It might be that you're playing to win, but just titling it has nothing to do with it, basically. Or the only way that it has something to do with it is if you say, look, I want to play to win, and therefore I'm going to take action properly, and taking action properly is by thinking accurately in terms of scenarios and understanding. Alchemy, adding in elements properly, which I'll continue to illustrate that. So that's the law of implication, that you attract the implication of your thoughts, which opens up a massive can of beans. But again, the law of implication is like the effect of the caricature of the law of attraction might be that bills are things, and you look at the title of a bill, and that's what is going to manifest. That's kind of an accidental surface understanding people get from the law of attraction. They think they just focus on something and picture it and visualize it, and that's going to manifest it for themselves, and they have to want it and so forth. You can call the bill the Affordable Care Act and feel like you really want health care to be affordable, and what's actually going to have the effect is the logical consequences of the contents of the bill. And then that's how we need to understand the law of attraction. And then there's also just going to be the environment that you're dealing with, right? The exact same bill, depending on the country and the culture and the other stuff going on, is going to have a difference, even if it's written the same with the same logical consequences. And so if you only looked at healthcare and how affordable it was, you couldn't necessarily figure out the wording of the bill of a country that they have about healthcare. But there are some things you might be able to narrow down. But you wouldn't be able to figure it all out necessarily, and you certainly on the surface wouldn't just immediately know it. You can use method to discover a number of things, perhaps based on what you see, just like logical deduction. Deduction is very different than inference. When you infer, you need several instances. I mean, you could try to infer from one instance, right, with a large margin of error, but from multiple instances, like interactions with a person, you infer whether they're a good guy or a jerk or competent or what. With a deduction, you can have one thing, one crime scene or whatever, and you can develop a whole number of things you can figure out from that correctly. That could also be called induction. The trouble with trying to get too much into what the word actually means is just colloquially and in practice the words can be used in different ways and can overlap. But we can call it induction versus inference, I think, unless it's possible that induction is used as a synonym for inference. My memory is, you could just look that up. I don't care how. It's just a fact, right? Facts aren't a big deal. Meaning we could just verify them the best we could. If I get a meaning of a word wrong, in terms of popular culture, it doesn't matter. We just correct it and move on. It does. The underlying ideas I'm talking about are the same. Okay, I'm going to wrap up here, and then we can continue as always in the next webinar. Might have had a little bit of an open loop, but we're fairly good. These are all things that I'll continue to develop, so it's not the end of the world if there's an open loop. But we're talking about self-confidence, of course, how we want to have our confidence based on method, I was talking about specific methods and more meta strategy, more deeper methods. That the good thing about deeper methods and having the deepest methods of things in place is that you always have something to fall back on. In terms of method, it can give you a very powerful confidence. And you can develop kind of methods that are applicable to, like, when you have a method like the semi-soft block thing, and then understanding that relates to building blocks that you can stack or breakthroughs that you're breaking through, one of those two. And either of those can be a semi-soft block. When you understand that, that applies to like any strategic instance. So great. And then as you come to understand this about methods, then developing and understanding methods takes on a much greater importance than it used to, which is terrific. Now you have your sense of importance more accurate at a fundamental level for yourself with your mind. And I know what I was wrapping up with, or what track I was on, is that inferring, successively approximating, it's not bad, but it's going to happen. Your mind's going to take care of it. What you want to do is set things up, and this is where I started talking about the law of implication. What you want to do is set things up by getting straight as many things as you can know as possible, so you narrow down the field or the gray area in which you need to use inference. Inference is fine and dandy, and you're going to use it all plenty in the gray areas. But a key to life is to narrow down the gray areas. You keep building what you know, and then your inferences get tighter and tighter. You can get to the point where it's like you're driving on a road and you're going not too fast. You have a safe car that's been checked recently in good working condition. There's a barrier. I'm forgetting the name of it, a guardrail on the side of the road, and so forth. So meaning that there's still a gray area. You don't know exactly where to steer or whatever, but as you're steering through feedback and so forth, there's a whole bunch of things you have in place that you know, like that guardrail, a safe car, you're not driving too fast, and so forth. You might understand that it's one of the useful things that my mom taught me was it's not you, it's the other guy, right? It's easy to think when driving, look, what's the problem? I can control my car just fine. But when you realize a tire can blow out or another person can do something unpredictable, then you drive ready for that. And once you're driving ready for that, then you're driving kind of the smartest, right, or the safest. If you're just driving based on that you can control your car as long as nothing else goes wrong, then that's an unsafe way to drive. The point being, that's just a scenario or an illustration, more like an illustration that contains the concept of the more stuff that you can know, that you can get right, it reduces the gray area into something manageable, where you're inferring within a range in which, however you end up doing it, it's not going to be a huge deal, and you're not going to make major mistakes. And the conditions are set so that you can correct your course and so forth. But the major idea here, of course, relates to the idea of seeing inference as when it's our foundation. That's a real big problem. And when it's what our self-confidence is based on, it's incredibly costly, and it's going to be worth $10 million to you and more. This is kind of the bottom line of why I said, if a friend came to you at the end of Alchemy, or at some point within Alchemy you reach, and they said, and if the only way to get it somehow was through paying $10 million, then would you recommend they do it? As you get this self-confidence thing, then and understanding to base it on method rather than inference and feedback and so forth, then that's just going to be flat out worth $10 million and way more to you. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm just saying, like, the actual benefit will easily be that, because you can either make that much money or don't need to make it, because you save yourself that much money and what you have to spend on proving to yourself that you're good enough and smart enough and so forth in order for you to take the next step and feel confident enough to do other stuff in life. And it's going to make you able to have much better relationships, including romantic relationship, which is so valuable, right? And that we would have put so much money into. And it's night and day difference if you base your understanding of your foundation of your relationship on method and understanding for yourself. Or even if you just base your own self-image on method and understanding, then your ability to be in a romantic relationship is radically different, and it's pretty much assured. I mean, you're just going to be so calm and confident and be able to be so attractive to the other person. And you'll just see them better because some people are so blinded. They're so much of their vision and their focus is taken up with dealing with their own self-image that it's so hard to see other people and what's going on with them and how their mind's working and so forth, what's important to them and all that. So, and we'll keep developing this idea, but I think we made terrific progress with it in this webinar. Let me see if there's anything, I can refer back to this slide, but there's anything quick and obvious. I've already covered this line about confidence and self-worth via inference, question mark. People feel the inference trap, but the wrong way to escape inferring is, I think that the main thing I had in mind here when I wrote this is we will we'll diminish, we'll kind of delete and marginalize sources that might give us the wrong inferences. So we'll either try to shrink down, or if someone is giving us feedback we don't like, then we'll find ways that we don't like that person, that person is morally inferior in some way. We might not put it in those terms, but we'll come to a conclusion that's equivalent to that. And I might have had some other thoughts about this, but they'll occur to me later, and I can refer back to it. All right, we are good with the discussion. I mean, with the monologue part, and we can discuss a little bit. And I wonder if I don't know if I'll do it quickly or not. So, oopsies. There we go. I'll skip to the end first. And then, what's this here? There you go, Dave. These are great examples. They're helping me understand a lot better the distinction between soft and semi-soft locks. Excellent. I'm glad, Jamari. Great. Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a critical meta strategy for strategy. And all this will keep being developed as we deal. One of the things we're going to be doing as we proceed, we're laying the foundation now, and then we'll be able to build back up and talk about specific detailed type situations, right? Building your offer, business relationship stuff, romantic relationship stuff, and it's all holographic. If I'm talking about romantic relationships and you feel like it's off topic, it doesn't matter, right? Because it all illustrates the same deeper meta strategies. So by getting into details, which we'll continue to we're getting closer to doing, then we'll be constantly reinforcing and illustrating the deeper meta strategies. And that's also why, although I give examples and scenarios and stuff, as I discuss them, I'm also not too worried because we're going to be using them and building off of them in the future. The answers to alchemy are not in the box. Fascinating. Success lies outside boxes we're in. Right, and exactly. And sometimes it doesn't. And Shima wrote this 50 minutes ago. But sometimes it doesn't. But then when it doesn't, it's pretty easy anyway, right? The main issue that we, like, when we study and think about success, we're not worried about success that we could have achieved anyway, right? We're worried about additional success that we wouldn't have achieved. Excellent concept on method. I like the cookbook metaphor, David. Excellent. Would you say the semi-soft lock method is similar to SEO splitting, where you build on or stack one feature of SEO and then upsell once the client gains confidence in your abilities? Exactly right, Sandra, especially when you realize that it's about stacking and the semi-soft lock, then you make sure to do it in a way that will stack best. As a parallel example of that, often people will write a sales letter and they will try to sell the product that they're selling, and there'll be an upsell, and they're trying to stack, they're like, well, first, or sorry, they're not. It's not that they're trying to stack. It's that they may or may not. They're in one sense trying to stack, but in another sense, people have this distance metaphor where they have to hit one milestone and then the next milestone. But it's not really a stack like that. That distance illustration of hitting milestones, it doesn't really have stacking in it very well. And so instead, people will go for these milestones like selling people on the first product or getting the opt-in or getting people to click over to their page, and then they want the opt-in. But if you think specifically in terms of stacking, then you'll make better decisions on the previous step, like in the sales letter that we're trying to sell the front-end product. And then we ultimately want, that'll be our first milestone, then we want to have the upsell. When we think of it in terms of stacking rather than milestones, we'll write the sales letter differently so that it stacks, so that the way that we sell the first product will help sell the next one. We might even mention the next product, for example. Rather than people will often sell their front-end product in a way that's counterproductive for their next product. Or they will fulfill it in a way that's counterproductive for the next step because they'll feel like they already achieved that milestone. People do this with getting married. They'll treat getting married like a milestone rather than something to keep, rather than like an ingredient to keep making their life better and stacking, including even doing better in business because you're married. It helps in a number of ways. I'm not in any way criticizing not being married. I think it's incredibly valid. I'm just using this as a type of example. There's a bazillion things in life you could use to stack, right? And marriage is only one of them. But anyhow, when you think of marriage in terms of stacking or to make your life better, then you pay differently attention to it, and you think of it as an ongoing thing. It's not like a milestone. And I thought of the marriage thing because, you know how people act differently, right? Like, what's the joke? What's the difference between a married, there's one for women and men that I'll get to, and forgive me if, if you don't like jokes that are like this. But what's the difference between a married man between a single man and a married man? 15 minutes. And what's the difference between a married woman and a single woman? 15 pounds, or something like that. So there's the idea that after marriage, people treat it like a milestone, where it's like okay, check, I achieved it, and then they're not stacking with it. They're not using it as something to make things even better. But the same thing with when you're selling something, if it's like a milestone that you kind of check off, and then people don't even fulfill their products that well, and then they try to make an upsell, right? It's counterproductive, and then they're always having to get new leads and new stuff because they're not stacking. And so people are always at square one trying to get to square two instead of stack, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is at the root of the root meta strategy of how Cotton is where he's at, is he just stacked and stacked. And he built things to stack on rather than just to be milestones, to increase his confidence to get to the next level. So if you're going to be using SEO stacking, make sure that it's presented and fulfilled in a way that'll stack properly. Law of implication and law of attraction and law of implication distinctions, so good and helpful and big, starting to seep in, loving this. Great, I'm glad, Shima. Yeah, distinguishing law of implication or showing how it builds on law of attraction, I think is a good way to explain what law of implication is. And I know you had a wonderful post in our Facebook group talking about that and your answer to your friend. I started to write something there and then I haven't gotten to it yet. I got interrupted and so forth. But it's part of thinking about that as part of why I talked about it in this webinar. The law of, and then Michael Ramirez wrote, the law of implication is a step up of the law of attraction, basically the next level. Thank you for such a great clarification. Great. So it looks like people like that. You're very welcome. Are these from Snapchats or that the posting? They're posting some pictures. Anyway, Chris says, thank you for stating we are stuck in a trap of self-confidence and we risk it going outside the box. I used to joke to friends, it is said that we should think outside the box. Would you please direct me to that box? I'd like to experience it sometime. Yeah, I know. It's fun to spend at least some time in the box, I agree. As an entrepreneur, it's like I've known how the the idea of like waking up and every morning you have no idea how to accomplish the things you're supposed to accomplish that day, right? Like you know the results you're supposed to get, but you have no idea how the heck you're supposed to achieve them. And you get like, geez, people that got, it's like jobs almost seem like is the thing that's too good to be true, right? People will say that it can be hype, like what people can do working for themselves and the results, but to me sometimes a job seems too good to be true, especially like a government job where you just kind of show up and pretty much no matter what you do, you get a paycheck and so forth. You said, I think creative types tend to have this affliction. As you said, at risk is self-confidence, and I agree with you on this point. Interestingly, by leaving the box or nest, one has to learn a different way, a way more akin to flying than walking, right? And you receive a kind of subtle but different type of confidence based on a higher view that is much more foundational, totally fluid, rather than belief-based, static, and contextual. Let me mention something. What you wrote, and I know that might have been hard to hear, hard to follow if someone's listening on like an MP3. But let me say this. There's something, though, to really watch out for. And it's like the expert trap. What you can do, and I think what happens to entrepreneurs, is they will get outside the box. And this happens to us also as we get older, I think. When we're younger, we're kind of more ready to try things and have energy and get outside the box. I think what happens, and I've said this in different ways, is people will get outside one box, feel that burst of self-confidence from coming outside the box, get in a different box, and then get comfortable. And it's not that, in essence, we do want to be comfortable within a box in life. And then the question is, but it's more about, we want to have something, and this is what what method does, by focusing on method and understanding. It's not really about the box or not. It's when you're trying to understand something, the first place you look is in the box, right? If I want something that another person can do for me, the first place I look is within the people I already know and the relationships I already have. So I look in the box, and then if it's not there, then I'll look outside the box. And when you're focused on understanding, then you're not really trapped either way. When you're in the self-confidence trap, then you're kind of always wanting to, you always have this pressure to kind of stay comfortable. And even when you get that feeling like, oh, this is great, I'm flying, then you can kind of get stuck there. You can get stuck on that next level. And then when you're seeking understanding, you don't really get stuck. Oh, and the other thing is, people can kind of get addicted to getting outside the box too. Or another way to think of it, in relationships, people can get really addicted to that feeling of, there's something that could feel like outside the box, but it's really something different. It's where people kind of want to keep getting the rush of a new relationship, right? Or a rush of finding a new shiny project, method, system that's going to make them money. There's that feeling of like something new that can kind of look like it's outside the box. And I'll look to think about that some more. It's kind of occurring to me as I'm saying it, about watching out for that. I've said something like that in different ways, but I just want to watch out for that. But people can really get that rush from being in a new relationship constantly, and you want to watch out for that sort of thing. And ultimately, you're welcome, Chris. He said thank you for your comment on it, helpful to me and whoever may read this. Thank you. Right, you want to have a method, and seeking understanding is basically at least my name for the method, even if it's not fully descriptive, or obviously doesn't contain all the details when I just say seeking understanding. But there's a way that seeking understanding, it sort of ignores whether you don't really want to get a rush from being outside the box or inside the box. You want whether you're in the box or out of the box to be like irrelevant, right? Because there's it's kind of, if you think about it, it's clearly besides the point. Right, like you want the right answer to be where the right answer, you want to look for the right answer wherever the right answer is. You don't want to, like, there's some people that are so into alternative stuff that it's like, they're so sure that alternative medicine is going to be better than traditional or mainstream or whatever Western medicine. But sometimes the right answer is going to be found within Western medicine, and the kind of cutting and mechanical based approach is going to be effective. And instead, we just want a method where, again, we're not really in the box, out of the box. We don't want to be incentivized to have a new relationship or to stay within our old relationships. We want to just be based on a different standard or a different way of looking, where it's like, going for the right results, getting them, and looking at our relationships that way. Do I need to get this result from a new relationship, or is it contained in the existing relationships that I have? That kind of thing. So again, we want the box not to be. We don't want to be motivated either to be in or out. We want to have a way to get outside that whole way of feeling and thinking. And again, not get in that alternative mindset too much, where everything's like a rebellion against the mainstream or something. Sometimes the mainstream's right. Rick wrote, great info, David. When people can see the same event and associate a different meaning to it, perhaps based on their culture, upbringing, how do we define truth? I had almost like a slide on this, or a thought. Something with subjective. Let me look here. Okay. I'll get to this more next time, but I'll just refer to it. Remember, the discussion is kind of like a parallel universe where if I cover something in discussion, it's kind of fair game where I can come back and talk about it as if I'd never talked about it in a monologue, or vice versa. But let me think here. When I talk about how to know what's true, then people skip constantly to knowing what's true about things that we actually can't know what's true about. And we, when we talk about knowing what's true, instead of knowing what's true about an event, we are going to there's going to be a number of, an event's like a cluster, and there's a number of things that we can know regarding our thinking about the event, or that we can deduce from the event, where without knowing everything about the event, or even things we might hope to know about the event. It's like with a political candidate, you can't, or a potential client, or a relationship partner, if you want to know that the person's going to be a great partner for you, then that you're not necessarily going to know that for sure. But what you can do is there's a whole number of other things, things that you could know, such as that you want to listen to the person, right? Rather than, people literally can jump in a relationship and feel totally sure that the person's great for them based on just things other than really listening to them. Ironically, it sounds funny, but there's and I'll do when I develop this. It'll of course make more sense. But it's kind of a simple thing to say, or circular. But at least this. Let me just refer to this: conditional versus subjective or relative knowledge. When you create a scenario and you stipulate conditions, like I'm on an island and there's 10 other people on the island and only 10, and then we go and try to do a project, and you kind of develop from there. Or if you say if 3 of them decide to form a government while you're asleep, or whatever, then you stipulate conditions, and then you develop the scenario, add elements, subtract an element, add something in, and develop it, and see how it plays out, and you'll learn things. The same thing if you're thinking about a business plan, right? Or if you're going to meet with a potential client, and you think, all right, suppose that they, in their head, if they're excited enough, they could possibly spend $2,000 a month for either maybe forever if they're getting results, or they'll be willing to try 6 months. So let's suppose that they're potentially willing to do that, and then let me think about what kind of presentation might get them to do that. What questions might they have? And you kind of immerse yourself in that. So you set certain conditions. You say they do have that money and cash flow. There is that potential for them, and they are open. They are someone that can make a decision, and so forth. If you can stipulate those conditions, and then you can discover a whole bunch of things from there if you'd like. A simple thing that might be true is that, you can stipulate, suppose they're not shopping around, then what factors would they be looking at, right? It would be more like a yes or no for them rather than it's not about being better than some other guy, but it is about exceeding their threshold that they would need to say yes to you. And then you could try to think about what factors might go into that. But on the other hand, if you create a condition where they are comparing you to some other potential search engine optimizers, then what else they might be looking for? Or it might be dominating their focus. All you need to do is be faster than the other guy, right? Like the bear chasing you. You don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun your friend, right? Right, the old kind of joke or whatever about like there's a bear chasing you and you and someone else, and you start to lace up your shoes, and they're like, hey, you can't outrun the bear even if your shoes are laced up. You're like, well, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. So then when you develop those, when you stipulate or develop those conditions where they're comparing you with some other people, then they're almost already a yes at that point to doing SEO. So it's a different type of thing, but instead you need to distinguish yourself as clearly better than the other ones. And especially if you establish yourself as significantly noticeably better in a kind of a clear way, then they especially won't be waffling about, if there's people that are close together, they might feel frustrated by making the decision and maybe think about whether they want to do SEO in the first place. And yet if you give them a lot of clarity regarding that you're better than people they might be comparing you to, then it might also keep them from thinking about whether to do SEO services, and the clarity that you give them really helps them make a decision. So I developed all that to illustrate how you could set conditions and then develop a scenario and discover things that are true based on the conditions you set, right? That's like a conditional, and a simple conditional is like if-then. If it rains, the sidewalk gets wet. So then if it rains, what's true? The sidewalk gets wet. If the first condition is met, the next must be true given the conditional. Conditional knowledge is it turns out to be extremely useful and relevant. And I illustrated it right then, right, presumably, by showing you how all the things you could discover based on setting certain conditions and then thinking from there what would have to be true. And in some of the things I said to you, you might say, well, do they have to be true, David? I can certainly, there's at least elements of those things that would be true. And there's just clearly useful things you discover by setting conditions and playing out the scenario. Conditional knowledge is different than subjective or relative knowledge. And we're going to want to think in terms of developing, we stipulate, and then we go from there, and we could figure out a whole bunch of things that also would need to be correct. And it's going to turn out that that's going to help us tremendously in real life. And so again, conditional knowledge is real knowledge, but it's based on the conditions being true. Then in real life, when you encounter those same conditions or what seems like it, you apply that. Do you know that the conditions are the same in real life? Sometimes not, but that doesn't matter so much, because clearly if you work through what you would do in different conditions about meeting with a client, then first of all, then you can try to be aware of which conditions are correct to start with and adapt. But you have useful knowledge. If you misjudge the conditions, you might not get that client, but still you're better off by having this conditional knowledge. You discover all sorts of useful things rather than not. And plenty of times in life we the conditions are just basically turn out to be how they seem, right, on kind of a broad, major level. If we're driving and there's a wall coming up in front of us or a building and the road goes right or left, then we want to turn right or left, and then we'll get that condition right. It'll seem like that's the case, and it will in fact be the case plenty of times. That isn't meant to be, that it's just, in the discussion I just kind of talk freely, and that'll help as it helps, and open you up as it opens you up, and then I'll deal with it more specifically in the future. But it's going to turn out that as we see more and more about how to get to things that are true, we're going to answer Rick's question. Again, his question was, when people can see the same event and associate a different meaning to it, perhaps based on their culture, upbringing, etc., how do we define truth? And it's going to turn out that that we'll come to understand that better. And sometimes you just can't know things, but you can know things about things you don't know. You can know parts of the cluster. My mother always told me you can't just drive for yourself, you have to drive for other people. You have to know all the possible scenarios they could do. I use that every day. Yep, yeah, Jamari, exactly. I find that quite useful myself. George wrote, totally lost on the statement about escaping inference. Can you take it a little further, please? What we want to get to, and I'll develop this because it's such an important concept. I'll develop it more, I'm sure, in future webinars. But when we know to look for it, there's a kind of a trap in life that we're kind of stuck in, and we want to get out. And one angle of alchemy is it's about helping us all get out of this. Is we're stuck with feedback. We're stuck with wanting certain feedback and not wanting other feedback. What happens is then we'll get pain we'll have avoidance towards certain types of feedback. People criticizing us, people, a rejection, going after a goal and not achieving it in a certain time frame. And and then we'll want other types of feedback. So we'll pay a lot for them. Like if I want feedback that a woman is impressed and that's going to cost me a few $1,000s of some sort, then if I really want that feedback, I'll pay it. So it'll cost me a few $1,000s. If I have a different way of seeing the world where I don't need that type of feedback, genuinely, where I genuinely don't need it, not where I just throw the baby out with the bathwater, where I say, forget about that woman. I don't care about her. She's crappy anyway, right? That's like what I said about a moral judgment. So when we're stuck in this whole inference thing, then we're stuck with these things like, do I pay a few $1,000 to get positive feedback from this woman, or do I diminish her morally so I don't care that I don't get that positive feedback, or do I not stretch and set goals for results that'll really be great for me to stack with because I'm afraid of the feedback that I didn't hit it within a certain time frame. And so this whole feedback trap is a constant issue for us all the time, when we have goals for feedback, when we want certain types of feedback and we don't want other feedback. When we're focused on understanding and method, then life isn't about feedback, and achieving results and happiness really isn't about feedback. What you'll get is like distinctions, or you'll achieve building blocks. Achieving a result isn't feedback. A result that you can stack on is different than feedback. Feedback is much more general. Achieving the fact that you've achieved a result that you could stack on, or the fact that you've broken a bottleneck, that in that way it stacks because you have a bottleneck broken. The fact that you've done so could be a subset of feedback. It could be put in the bucket of feedback. You could say that's a type of feedback. In that way, that's fine. Or the fact that you've made a useful distinction, you could decide that's feedback. That's useful as well. But there's all sorts of other feedback that we don't want, and it's not about feedback. It's about the stackable result, the breaking the bottleneck, the distinction, the understanding. And so we're not looking at feedback. Much like I said, we're not looking at whether we're in the box or outside the box. It's not relevant. What's relevant is where's the answer. So we want to look at things differently so that it's not about feedback one way or the other. And feedback is part of this whole inference thing. When you're inferring, then you need to. When you inferring means you're hearing back from the world, or you're seeing back from the world that things are one way rather than another. So you see that the sun rises in the morning, then that's like feedback, right? It's a visual feedback that the sun rises in the morning. If a person tells you that you're attractive, or if a client tells you that you seem like a great SEO and so on that they'd like to work with, then that helps you infer that you're a good enough person, that you're a worthy, valuable person. And you don't want to be in that whole way of thinking. Celine wrote, thank you, David, for what you explained about understanding versus inferring and for the example you gave. You're welcome, George, and I don't consider the case closed on that, just so you know. I think I gave some more talk and some more explanation, but I'll continue to develop it. Again, with alchemy, there's like a few just massive distinctions. And this thing about the inference trap and self-image and method versus understanding versus inference and source versus method, it's kind of the whole thing I had in mind for you, in one sense, especially for it being worth $10 million that you get it. And so all of alchemy is about that same question in a sense. This whole thing on escaping inference is like literally, you can go back to the first alchemy and you can watch through the last one, the 30th one or whatever that we'll do, and it'll all be about the same thing. And if I thought that like it doesn't matter, and if you get it today and the rest of the alchemies are just entertainment after that, of course you'll get a whole bunch of useful details and nuggets, but of course it'll all just be worth it. If you got it in the first webinar, then great. That's the huge value of alchemy, is getting out of this inference trap and understanding more and more about method, and then we can, every specific method I give you, that'll be useful, but what matters much more is the basic idea of understanding in method versus source and inference. Okay, Celine wrote, thank you, David, for what you explained about understanding versus inferring and for the example you gave. It opened my eyes on the way I'm dealing with the situation I'm going through at the moment. Good. And I think we're all probably going through various situations where this is affecting us. It's just so central to how we deal with life and to all the costs and the way that we spend our resources. Okay, Celine went on to write, I recently felt like a friend of mine is not very interested in being a friend. My reaction was exactly what you described. I thought of getting away from the relationship instead of trying to figure out what's going on. With what you said, I can try to find a better way to deal with the whole situation. And let me stop here just so I don't forget a thought. Remember, in addition to just finding out what's going on, which is totally valid, sometimes you don't even need to exactly figure out what's going on. Sometimes there actually isn't that much going on, and it's sort of a random fluctuation. Or sometimes there is something going on, but it'll just kind of pass on its own. And by not treating it like a whole thing or a trend, and by just building the relationship as normal, then that'll work. Now, sometimes there's a new element that got introduced, or there's something that you said that's now getting mixed in, like alchemy, but in a bad way. And you do need to identify it and get rid of it. And one way to find that out is you try to maybe climb the mountain you're on, like kind of just operate kind of well and normally within the relationship. And if it still seems to be having some kind of issue or drag, then there's probably some new ingredient that you need to dissolve by understanding it. But sometimes there isn't that ingredient, and looking for it in itself kind of creates an issue. If someone's like, what's wrong, but there really just isn't anything wrong. Or sometimes people, we tend to, sometimes things are about ourselves and there's an ingredient from something we did or said, or at least perceived to have done or said, that does matter, but often probably about half the time that we think it's something about us, it's not, roughly speaking. Even there's experiments that play that out. So also what you don't want to do is too much think that it's you. If it's not, then you're looking in the wrong place. But it might be in that place, but it might not. About it being something regarding you or with them that you could help with. I know that you're not assuming that it's you. But Okay, and then Celine went on. With what you said, I can try to find a better way to deal with the whole situation. Listening to you helped me see so many ways where my beliefs and ideas listening to you helps me see so many ways where my beliefs and ideas are wrong. I'm glad you're thanking me for that and not angry at me for that. Right? But part of alchemy is that it's a way to help do that with all of us, where it feels good rather than like an attack, right? But that takes the whole context. That's part of why it's kind of a big project. Usually, right? People, it's not going to be like the most welcome thing. However, I still feel blocked in a way and feel like I'm fighting my mind when I want to think about something. I hope that with time, I'll get more understanding and that I'll be about to get rid of the wrong ideas in my mind. Yeah, I think we will. We're going to keep hitting this in different ways, different angles, and the central concept, I think, is well identified, where we can keep attacking it, so to speak. And as I give more scenarios and stuff, I think we'll keep doing that. There's a number of blocks or misconceptions and so forth that until I hit upon your specific one, or there's often a number of specific ones actually. And so there might be 12 things that I'll need to point out because the right answer doesn't help until I'm going to need to point out a number of kind of wrong answers and wrong ways of doing things like I did in this webinar, I think, pretty well. But there'll be more of those where until they're shown, where you kind of see them distinctly and see how they're wrong. They're wrong in certain ways. Yeah, just like inference. Inference is not inherently wrong, but it's wrong when used as a foundation, and it's wrong in certain instances. Mike gave a YouTube link that I can click on a bit later, or I can just go for it. Let's just see what it is. You're Stuart Smalley. That's great. There we go. You can draw inferences just from what you yourself say, right? So it's true in a sense. It's true that building confidence leads to projecting more confidence, which helps you. The problem is that it's very risky, right? And it's built to fail. It'll look like it's succeeding, and sometimes it'll succeed enough, like you can infer enough confidence that you then in yourself, as an SEO and as a salesperson for SEO consulting, that you get a client, and that can work, and then you can succeed with that client, and you can get more clients, and that whole situation can work pretty well. But it could also not work. And plenty of people are stuck in a trap where they're trying to, it's like trying to get on Oprah if you are an author. If you get on Oprah, especially back when she was on, I think it was NBC, then you're going to become like a best-selling author, and that could launch your entire career. Plenty of people launch their whole career based on getting on Oprah, right? And that worked for a lot of people. But it's like that semi-soft lock, or that's almost more like a hard lock. But however it is, and Jamari said something related to that here that I'll read in a moment. But regardless, if you get on Oprah, you could succeed. That'll work. That did work for lots of people. But it's such a big thing to bite off at once that staying within that, or just trying to find a person that matches you so well that they end up, in effect, doing what you want so much and so often that you're happy, right? If that's your method for being happy in a relationship, that works for some people, right? Maybe, but apparently. But it's a low percentage play, right? And we want something where we have much more assured success. And even if we're successful with client consulting in that way, if we're trying to live our lives that way, then we are going to fail a lot of other times, which is going to mess with our self-confidence, right? And then also there's a way in which our success, we're going to really have a hard time getting off the ground, even with that, because we get a client, our self-confidence is based on them staying with us. So we're probably going to behave in ways that are particularly extra needy. Now, I myself will, if it was my first client, I would be doing a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily do if I had 10 clients in order to make sure it worked, to build because I'm stacking. So I pay, but it's my decisions are based on stacking. And if the client was going to be undermining me for stacking, if they weren't going to be someone that I could stack on, I wouldn't be investing as much. But something that I could stack with a client, or even just that it was giving me someone to practice on because I wanted to do SEO for a business that was real and had a real address and had a real website in a way that's it's hard to duplicate if you're just building like let's say you're trying to build a local plumber site for yourself, but there's no actual plumber involved, then there's certain building blocks or certain elements that you don't have on that website. I mean, you can fake it pretty darn well, and you could rank that site that way. But there's a way that it might be really cool just to do it for an actual client. There's a lot I might be doing, but it wouldn't be because I was scared of my self-confidence being undermined. It would be because I was focused on the stacking, and because I'd be focused on it was going to give me something to stack on. If it was, then I'd also be differently motivated. I wouldn't be. A lot of people, they get conflicted because they get in these relationships where they depend on the relationship for validation of their self-confidence. But in order to get that validation, they have to do things that are clearly begging and needy, which will undermine their self-confidence. And again, they're stuck in that another example of the inference trap, right? That feedback trap. So it just is kind of built to fail on so many levels. It might end up succeeding anyway, but in general in life, you don't want to build things to fail and then hope to succeed anyway. You want to have something that's kind of built to succeed. You want to set yourself up for success in the planning stage. And then we need to know how to plan properly. And that involves the accurate type of thinking that I'm developing here in Alchemy. Jamari writes, so a soft lock is like a grand slam home run. It's kind of more like a home run is a soft lock, a grand slam, or something might be a little bit more like a hard lock. Not exactly. A hard lock is when you really can't lose no matter how incompetent you are. Almost like there's not like it's a little bit of a continuum. It's a little bit of a gradual difference between a hard lock, a soft lock, and a semi-soft lock. And the specific idea is you want to think it isn't exactly what's the smallest. You're trying to find an overlap where you're almost going for the largest, but thing that you like result you can get, like the semi-soft lock, but that's a short, like, how do I put this? I think you basically, most of you can generally feel it already or know, but you're looking for, it could be a base hit, it could be a way of approaching getting base hits. It's something where if you focus, you're assured to get it. The problem with a base hit is you might not even get a base hit, right? Whenever you're competing against someone else, you're not assured to win because they could use just as good strategy as you, and then it's a matter of luck or where they're starting out. So you can't assure yourself, a win in a competitive situation, but you can give yourself the best possible. You can set yourself up very well, in which case you'll, in practice, win nearly all the time. But you're looking, with a semi-soft lock, you're looking for something that you can quite certainly achieve if you focus on it and you're willing to spend enough resources on it. And it's kind of a sweet, you're looking for a reasonable sweet spot where you can achieve it and where it's going to give you a certain advantage that you can build on. That now, by behaving competently, which includes iterating the same strategy, now you have a building block where it's going to be even easier to hit the next thing that's going to give you a leg up in the future. So it's hard to think of a good, perfect baseball analogy, but in the situation with group theory and with dating, where you're in an event where you can meet somebody usually, right? That then it's going to be easier to introduce yourself to other groups if you know one person. Then you can kind of, even if that person doesn't know anyone else, you can kind of now you're with someone, you can kind of introduce that person to other people. That'll be kind of an in and go from there. Just meeting someone is so much more doable, especially if you focus on it, than meeting the exact woman of your dreams directly. Very cool, Mike. Mike Brabo wrote a good thing. It'd be more like putting together a team who just tries to hit home runs versus one that uses situational hitting, moves runners along, etc. That's a great statement, Mike. Thank you. Rick wrote, I have used inference in the past when people have told me I wouldn't be successful as motivation to prove them wrong. Is this a positive use of inference? Okay, so someone is critical of you. It says you can't succeed, and you let that motivate you to succeed. What? Let's see here. It's certainly if people tell you that you can't do something and it's a useful thing to do, then proving them wrong as additional motivation is certainly better than letting it deject you. So it's better within a certain circle, but I think you want to be outside of that game altogether. I think you want to be deciding what results you want to get. And you decide what result you want to get by thinking, as always, like stacking. You don't think really whether it's impossible, like whether you, okay, so ultimately you want to be happy. Then you can think of relatively big goals, regardless whether they're impossible, and then you get to them. If they're logically impossible, that's one thing. If they're not logically impossible, and if they're pretty clearly something you want to go for, then you don't worry if it's possible or not. You just go for it. You can also think, is going for this seemingly impossible goal, is shooting for it going to be helpful? In a lot of cases it will anyway. Yeah, money is an easy example. Having a terrific relationship might be an example. Helping thousands of people might be an example. Or helping one person who could be very difficult to help might be an example of something. And if going for it is going to help you anyway. But then that's once you identify a result that you really want to get, that you genuinely want to get, as long as it's not logically impossible, then that's when you start using the semi-soft locks. And then you want to build things that will stack. And you want to focus on stacking either positive ingredients or breaking bottlenecks, right? Either it's a building block or a bottleneck that's broken. One of those two things. And when you see what you can build with something, that should give you all the motivation you need. So I do think you want to get out of the inference trap altogether, but I agree in practice that plenty of people have achieved results that they wanted by using the doubters and the haters to kind of motivate them even more. But again, I try to get out of that whole way of thinking as best as I can. You're welcome, Anna. She said, thank you for the clarity. We've been about 2.5 hours, so I'll look to bring things to a close. I'll do any last little quick things. Chad wrote, David, I'm really resonating with these different ways of looking at things. Mixing. It makes me feel more patient and content, also seeing a boost in creativity. I'm so glad, Chad. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. Shima said, question, I have too many open loops. Example, I start a day with a goal to spend 2 hours studying a WordPress training module, and other tasks pull on me. If you have too many loops, understand that you can only do one at a time. Pick one and focus in and finish it. If there's something that has to get done at a certain time or you have to meet someone, then you meet them, right? But generally, any kind of overwhelmed or too many things pulling at you, if they're all useful, just pick one. And if one of the things people don't realize, and my wife, this is what I might have mentioned this before, but my wife likes this one. It just helps her in practice a lot. If a decision is difficult, this is ironic. This is a funny little ironic nugget, but this has a lot of practical value for a lot of people. If a decision is difficult, it's typically because the difference between making one decision versus the other is not that big of a difference. It's not that important. Even if it's a really important thing in life, like where you go to college, if the decision seems difficult because you can't tell the difference between things, because wherever you end up going, especially based on the information you have, you can't tell which one will be better anyway, then just pick at random. So again, the most difficult decisions are often the ones where the result, especially relative to what you could know, is indistinguishable from one or the other. So let's say you have 2 or 3 really important tasks that have to get done, and you can't decide which one to do, then it's probably because they're all about equally importance. It hardly matters for your quality of life which one you pick. because they each have like approximately equal impact on your life, even if the impact of each one is large. So just pick at random and work on it, and that's going to be most efficient. And it was just funny. My wife just loves that. When I explained that to her years ago, she uses it all the time. Jamari really likes the law of attraction, law of implication mixing, and the way I distinguish those. That was a mind-blowing moment for me. No one has ever mixed law of attraction like that before. Amazing. Well, thank you. That's awesome. I'm so glad I got to that and explained it. And thank you, Shima, for your post that kind of got me to think about saying that. Bryce wrote, I've been making inferences when it comes to driving as well. I almost got into an accident the other day, and I was thinking that it was the other driver's fault, when in reality it was mine. Goes to show you that assuming that everyone is a bad driver, defensive driving, right? And this is a quick moment where I can say the difference between stipulating and assuming. You don't need to assume everyone's a bad driver. You can just stipulate that it's possible. Or you can note it, stipulate it. I don't have to get too much into stipulating right now with this example. But you don't need to like assume it's true that everyone's a bad driver. You can just recognize that no matter that here you can say, if anyone's a bad driver, then it could be the guy in front of me, even if it's 1 out of 1,000. Or it's not even that they're a bad driver, but they could have a bad moment, right? So even if bad moments are rare, I don't know when they're going to occur, so I will drive accordingly. Let's quickly read what Megan wrote and see. David, when using law of implication and going from method and understanding in business relationships and romantic relationships where people want the same results, it's probably quite unusual that your partner or partners do not see. It's probably quite usual that your partner or partners do not see the value of LOI or alchemy. That's right. And keep going after other teachers' feedback and basing results on sources or ideas that are contrary to what we're learning. That's correct. Yep. For sure. And before I read further, definitely. And we're definitely going to want to, as we relate to other people, we're not going to want to relate to them in a way where the difference between us and them and our understanding of these ideas, it'll really create a difference, right, in our understanding of the world. We're going to want to turn that in our favor, not against us. We're not going to want to frustrate us or whatever. We're going to want to use it to help us, and I do use it to help me a lot. But I'll make sure to point that out in the future. As I deal with relationships, I'm glad you brought this to my attention. It'll help give me clarity as I'm knowing what to talk about. So thank you. Just because I'm wrapping up here for time, I won't read the rest of that. I'll read it, but not on the webinar. And all of these posts are on each of the Alchemy threads are labeled by Alchemy and then the number of which Alchemy it is. So they're searchable by anybody in the OMG Way Facebook group, and everyone can read everyone's comments at any time. Jamari wrote, using law of implication, if I understand it correctly, you can step outside of one box, step in another one, and then combine or mix what you know from both boxes if it helps overall build understanding to the right answer and methods. That it's a little bit abstract what you're saying, but there's certainly what you mean by that. Like I can interpret that in a way that's correct for sure, and to a good degree. And then in order to fully address this, we'd have to look at different things it could mean and build a scenario. What we do is we build a scenario that illustrated this clearly in a clear way, and I might do that at some point. But that's how I would deal with it. And sometimes we don't know what scenario to start with, so I start with something simple like okay, so I'm a guy in an island, and then there's another person there, and I'm looking. You talk about stepping in a box, and outside another one, I think of a problem I'd be trying to solve, and then I'd be thinking about what might be kind of an in-the-box solution, and so forth, and I develop it from there. And as I started to flesh things out, I might switch the scenario in order to make something that was more applicable, and then I would look to have clarity to the question in that way. Francisco wrote, thank you so much, David. Michael wrote, the discussion part of this process has a great impact with understanding the bigger overall picture. Thank you. You're very welcome, Michael. Outrunning your friend rather than the bear. Loving this session, David. Thank you. You're welcome. That's a pretty well-known thing. I don't get credit for it, but I'm glad you liked it. Rick wrote, thanks so much for answering my questions and others. Very grateful to have this course to complement and enhance OMG. And Shima wrote, me too. You're very welcome. Could you do a brief review of your meaning of clusters? I'm a bit blurry still. Sure. I'll make a note of that at least. Right now. It seems like every webinar we do, there's still plenty of webinars to go. Lots more stuff to cover, huh? And it's funny though, because it really, I think in one way though, you're starting to see how there's really like one or a few central ideas that kind of relate, right? And a lot of this is about clarifying those, getting to those, and they're not like ideas that are interesting because I'm interested in them or because they're cool, but because they're central to our lives. They're like the most important. Like I am talking about what I'm talking about, not because I want to talk about it or not, but because it's my assessment of the most important, most practical, most applicable ideas that there are. And I'm talking about them for that reason. Chris wrote, listening to you today inspired the following conceptual chain. Method, momentum yields manifestation, and then to mastery, which, as you say, is a very different approach than the common interpretation of the law of attraction. Appreciate that, David. Most excellent. You're very welcome. Yeah, right. And then basing things in method. He's like method and then like arrow to momentum yields manifestation, and then yield leads to mastery. And great. Starting with method is critical, and that's one angle on like the whole enchilada. Basing like the idea of foundationalism and method, and then leading to mastery. Excellent. Mastery is one of the things I always flirt with calling my courses, because it is we're always getting, it is really based on getting to mastery of things. And then momentum, absolutely yielding manifestation, especially as we understand momentum not in so much in a velocity and distance way of looking at things, because we tend to have the wrong idea of goals when we use the default kind of way of looking at them in terms of getting to a distance with milestones and velocity and momentum, and correcting our course. Better to think in terms of stacking and breakthroughs and building blocks. That's a really awesome, just that one thing, stacking, breakthroughs, and building blocks is incredibly helpful and very practical. If you just ask that question whenever you're thinking about what to do next in your day, or what result to go after, big or small, either it's a semi-soft lock or a big thing that you're trying to do, thinking of stacking. And it also just opens you up to huge results. Once it really sunk in for me how to get results, how to get answers to questions, that's when I realized I can go for really big things ultimately. And not just a lot of money, right? But which isn't necessarily a problem. I'm not denigrating going for a lot of money. And I really think that's a great path for a lot of people. Actually, but whatever it might be, just going for big stuff, but not for the sake of it being big, but just because in some cases bigger is better. In other cases it's not. But in terms of helping people, bigger is better, right? At least interpreted in a certain way. But there might be ways to interpret that that's not necessarily correct. Individuals matter. So when I say bigger is better, I don't mean helping one individual can be just massive and worth focusing years or a whole life on, potentially. So I just don't want bigger is better interpreted like there's some problem with really helping one person who needs it. As long as ultimately you're not limiting yourself. Whatever you might get by that. Adrian, perhaps, Van Sveden, writes, thanks, David. I'm starting to see how much resources I'm spending on my self-confidence and self-image. 80%, question mark? Yeah, very possibly. And really in a way that snowballs in the opposite direction. It's almost like 80%, or you have 20% left over, but then you get 20% of the results, and that stacks, and then it's like you multiply 20% by 20%, get 4%, and then it kind of iterates until you dwindle down to where the goals you can go for end up being restricted, where you just can't get out of a particular box, and it goes to 0 in terms of your ability to get past certain boundaries or results in your life, right? So someone might have 0% ability to have a happy relationship. It's not like it's 5 times more costly, but they might just have 0 ability no matter how much they spend. They might spend everything and not even get to a happy relationship or to success with their monetization of whatever sort that might be. So people end up basically spending everything and not getting the result they want by getting trapped in the self-image, self-confidence, inference trap. And it's worth everything to get out of that. And it takes, none of this can happen by a direct act of will, right? It takes understanding. Understanding is an action, right? That practically speaking involves scenarios and method that I'll continue to develop. Not to mention the fear and stress that come with it, absolutely, that Adrienne wrote. What can I do to be free of it? Building scenarios with inference and the method-based confidence. That's correct, and I'll definitely be developing this. In a sense, all of alchemy is about this one idea of if you can just get away from the wrong type of self-image and build the right type of self-image. It's not just the right standards and norms. It's the right method. Excuse me, the right method underlying your self-image, and the fact that it is based on methods rather than standards and norms based on inference. And I'll just continue with it, and we'll get there further and further. But I think today was a great step forward, and probably every alchemy session, but today is one of them. Megan Lee, repeating a missed question above, David, when using law of implication and going from method and understanding in business relationships, actions, and in romantic relationships and actions where people want the same results, it's probably quite unusual. And yeah, I'll look to get to this maybe even in the next webinar, Megan. So I will, maybe even on Monday, I'll be able to work it in. Is there an approach that will work and also that everyone can work harmoniously together? Or saying, yes, alchemy is great, but I want to mix it with all these other ideas. Is there a way to work successfully in marriage and business as a JV with partners who see things in the default way? There absolutely is. To an extent, as long as those, you want people, it relates, in another way, it relates to like the cluster idea. You do want people that you can reach in a certain way. Well, with marriage, you want to be able to reach someone in a certain way. With business relationships, depending on how close, you only need to reach them to a certain extent. But yeah, no, you can definitely work with people without them understanding any of these ideas. There's some people there's plenty of people you might not still want to work with, but then there's plenty of people you can work with, and that can be terrific to work with. One simple kind of indication is that you can build trust. I saw a title of a book by Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and then he wrote something called like The Speed of Trust. And I didn't really look much into it, but just the title says a lot, right? And I believe I don't want to project too much or be kind of condescending or overconfident or whatever, but you can almost quickly know what the person means. I mean, that's how I deal in business a lot, is if people can trust me, then one of the ways, and this is not the only way, but one of the ways that I personally use these alchemy ideas is that I recognize that over time, people will trust me more and more, including my judgment. But it takes time, and they're not going to I don't expect them to trust me hardly at all at first. Although these days, because of my success, then they started a higher default, starting out point with trusting me. But even people that see my success feel like they trust me so much, really, when push comes to shove, they're going to trust their own thoughts, right, and their own beliefs. But over time, I get more and more to the benefit of the doubt. I build that and build that, and I know it's going to happen, so I chill out and I relax, and I understand that I'm not going to have that much trust to start with, and then I let it. I realize it's going to build, and I find ways, like I get a sense of how people are heading themselves, what their beliefs are, what they're mixing with all the different situations, so to speak, what their talents, their weaknesses, their inclinations, their motivations, little things that might set them off, things to watch out for. And I try to get a sense of all of it and just set them up for success within their motivations, strengths, weaknesses, and so forth. And there's all sorts of things that if people trusted me like totally, I could do real fast. And I just let go of those things. I don't worry. I don't try to accomplish those things immediately. I might get to them, and that's what I understand. I'm like, as trust builds, I might be able to help people make certain changes, but I don't base anything. I can build a very successful business without basing it on people need to change. I never have the thought, oh, this person needs to get this, they need to get that, they need this, they need that. Either you can work with the way people already are in so many cases, and in some cases you can't, and then you just don't work with those people, or you finish the task that you're working with, do your best to get the best result you can given how people are, and then move along, and you don't work with them again in the future. Or you might work with them, but on a more limited basis, or on just a different type of task where it is set up for them. Environment really matters. There might be some instances and tasks and projects, including other people involved with those projects, where a person is not appropriate. There might be other things where the person is very appropriate. Some people are very appropriate to be affiliates for OMG, where they're not so appropriate to play a different type of role with OMG, for example. But I don't base. There's plenty of results you can think of in life that theoretically you could get if somebody else would just do such and such that they seem capable of. But if they're not going to do it, then they're just not going to do it, and I just don't. I let it go. If Oprah would have me on her show, right, then I could be more successful. But I don't sit around worrying about it. But it's no different if someone you're working with, if they just did something and then it would be better. Then if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. And if I don't know how to show them how to want to do it and set them up for success with it, then I don't beat my head against the wall worrying, oh, if I just thought of just the right thing and cajoled them in just the right way or did this or that. If I either understand or I build to understand, and if I build to where I do understand how to get them to do it, then great. And if I never do, then I never do. Of course, I'm winding down here, supposedly, but Mike wrote, another great thing about LOI and alchemy is how it works for us before we understand it all. Right, exactly. And that's how questions work in general, right, Mike? Is questions go to work for us before we get the answer, especially when we know to go for the semi-soft blocks or go look around in context for the next building block or the next breakthrough. And then Mike wrote, continue, right, having created a program based on my early understanding of LOI and breakthrough stacking, then taking MAM, Mass Advantage for Mere Mortals, my information product course, took it to another level. Thank you, and thank you for that plug, Mike. I appreciate that. Seeing how the concepts today are already at work in it before I understood them. Oh, that's terrific. Excellent. Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be holographic too, right? Do you guys know, like with a hologram, I was talking to someone I worked with the other day that actually it was new to them when I explained how a hologram worked. A hologram is, you just think of it like a film, that if you shine light or reflect light on it, you'll see well, I guess there's maybe two. There's a type where it looks like it's on the film itself, and then there's a hologram that you shine light through, and then you see like an actual like kind of illusion or image in the air, or so to speak, of like an apple. Let's imagine that type where there's a hologram film where you shine a light through it, and then it shows you an apple, or obviously a visual image of an apple that's not really there. If that holographic film is like 2 inches by 2 inches, if you cut a part of it, like a centimeter by centimeter part, and you shine a light through just that part, you'll see the whole apple. The apple will be a little less distinct, a little more blurry, a little lacking in detail, but the whole apple will be there. So when something is holographic, then if you cut a piece off, it kind of contains the whole image or the main image. And that's a bit how my stuff will tend to be. is every webinar will sort of contain the examples or refer to the whole image and things like that. And Megan, about the relationship stuff that I talked about. Thanks, David. So grateful for the answers. I'm looking forward to more clarity in next webinars. You're very welcome, Megan. And then the hologram thing was for Mike. And holographic things come up in life. It's useful to have that illustration. Susanna wrote, thank you, David. This is valuable information. I'll listen to the replay as soon as it is up. Yep, great. I should have it up later this evening. Things have to process and such. Okay, I'll definitely wrap things up here. Just some thank yous I appreciate. Ziela wrote, love your just pick one explanation. Thanks, David. Absolutely. For some people, that's going to save you minutes or even hours a day, right? Or once in a while, it's just going to really help you. Michael Long wrote, this is one of dozens of invaluable heuristics that David has spotted. I've used it well many times. Absolutely, Mike. Thank you, Mike. And Elizabeth said, me too. 4 hours ago, I set out to do something I've done for others, and now getting to my original tasks. Great. Ziela wrote, this is a big thing for me because I get paralyzed sometimes about making a decision and not achieve anything in the end. So really enlightening. No, really, I agree. If I hadn't said it before in Alchemy, I'm glad I said that because it's definitely totally helpful just to realize, pick at random sometimes. David, could you please give a quick definition of a breakthrough? Yeah. So with OMG, as I was building it, then we needed to have a product, we needed to have traffic, and we needed to have conversion, right? Like a sales mechanism, right? A traffic is like a potential customer, and then we have an offer for them, the product, but then we need a way to present that offer, right? Like a sales letter, or any sort of webinars or a video on the sales letter. Let's suppose that we're getting traffic. This didn't happen exactly, or whatever, depending on how you measure it or call it. But suppose we're getting traffic, people coming to our website, say from a particular affiliate, but when they hit our sales letter, we're not getting the number of people buying our product that we would hope for. Then that's like a bottleneck where there's people coming in, but they're not getting through to the next step. So we need a breakthrough in terms of what to say, and then we realize a way to present our sales letter in a way that works effectively. Then we had a breakthrough. So there was like a bottleneck where we weren't getting a result we wanted. Something was blocking it or slowing it down, and we had an idea that broke us through. Now, within that breakthrough, there might have been a building block, or maybe we realized that we wanted an additional part of our offer that was going to be attractive, or we added an element onto our sales letter. So you could think of it as a building block too. But once you think in terms of what's the next thing that, and that's why knowing to understand business in terms of product, traffic, and conversion is helpful, because you look at which one of those is where like kind of the slowdown is taking place, right? And if you can't tell, if you're not sure whether it's conversion or offer, maybe it's, you pick one at random, right? Because that means either one is kind of valid. But by knowing where to look, so you look and you see where's the slowdown, where if I could, open this up or have it working better. So that's what I mean. Or if you're you have a relationship with someone and there's something kind of seemingly impeding your communication. You're not getting each other. And maybe there was a cultural misunderstanding that even if you guys look like you're the same culture, but one person was raised one way, and there's like a particular statement you are making or an idea that you were trying to get across, and you thought they knew, but they were interpreting it differently. Like my kind of go-to example in Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, about if he says if a woman can say like, oh, we never go dancing, and it just means that she wants to go dancing that night, not that you're a bad boyfriend or that you actually never go dancing, and realizing that is an example of a breakthrough. The traffic was getting gummed up there. Mike wrote, David and I constantly discuss the vital value of these discussions. Oh, this part, right? This part of the webinar, which are possible because of so many excellent questions. Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys so much I really appreciate the interaction we have. It's amazing on these webinars. Okay, I really will end it here after 3 hours. Thanks, David. You're doing a great job. Right, Clown Silver. You're very welcome. Great. All right. Okay, I will wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much. And comments won't be lost. They're all on here for me to refer back to and so forth. But just a terrific discussion as always. And wonderful. I'm really happy once again. All worked out so great. And this will be forever. You know, this will be had forever to help people in one way, shape, or form. So this thing that you're helping me create together is, you know, it's going to be a building block that'll be here for all time. And I just so appreciate the part you play on these live webinars. You're welcome, guys. Thank you so much. All right. You're very welcome, Christian. And Ziala, you're very welcome. And Peter and Brian and Chad. All right. I will end it here. You're welcome, Sally and Michael. You're all just great. It's fun. These last few minutes of the end are fun, right? Thanking each other and everything. So excellent.